Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Welcome. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Yeah. How you doing? Today's Monday, January 10th, 2022. 10 days into the new year. Only 355 days left. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of nowhere. A total undisclosed location. But it is beautiful in here. Yeah, it is. It is. I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer, and UnX Networks. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? I am looking in Twitter. Maria Clark has got the Fade to Black being typed on the typewriter. Is this from American Horror Story? That's cool. That is, isn't it? That's got to be. Where did you get that? Can you send me? You know what? That's in Twitter. Hashtag F2B. Where did you find this? Can you send me the download for it? I want to know. That's from Maria Clark. Well done. Well played. Well played. Tonight, here on Fade to Black, very special guest, the one and only Micah Hanks. Micah Hanks is here. Tonight, we're going to do a complete deep dive into the Washington, D.C. UAPs. What's going on in 2022? There is lots to talk about tonight. And I'm going to talk about some other stuff in 2021. Micah has got his finger on the pulse of everything, and I follow him very closely. And so we're going to do a bit of that and, of course, a very hard look at what is going on right now in Washington, D.C., and what this means for our community and the year 2022. All of that tonight. Tomorrow night, as promised, Emily Harrison joins us. And she's amazing. First-time guest. She is going to be here to discuss the Akashic Records, and that is tomorrow night. Wednesday night, a very special show. We have Serena Wright-Taylor and Susan Slaughter joining us to talk about the 2022 Conscious Life Expo. And Susan, everybody knows Serena, but Susan, one of the great paranormal investigators in the country. She's amazing. And I've done a couple of different shows with her and have worked with her. And her knowledge on the subject is incredible. But what is so cool is she, for the first time, is going to be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo. She's got 4 different events lined up. And I haven't had Susan on the show for a minute now, since last summer. And what a great opportunity to get Susan back on with us and to discuss the 2022 Conscious Life Expo, which is coming up in 3 weeks at the LAX Hilton. The links for the Conscious Life Expo are in the video description box below. You can go and click on that. We have it over on the website. We have it throughout social media. It's consciouslifeexpo.com. You can head there now for your tickets and information and lodging and staying at the Hilton and all of that. And so go and take care of it now. We will see all of you there in 3 short weeks. Oh, man, a live, in-person, ginormous, the biggest conference of the year or any other year. And I'm so looking forward to this. And I will, I'm going to do the keynote on panel on Friday night at in my normal spot downstairs in the big Plaza Ballroom. And that's Friday night. And then Saturday night, probably, and I was talking to T over at the Conscious Life Expo this week. She's amazing. And I said, you know what, Conscious Life, it is such a big event, and it's, it's the highlight of the year for me personally and everybody else and all of that. I said, you know what, but it's not the Conscious Life Expo for me anymore. It's not. It's the talent show, Expo's Got Talent, on Saturday night. That's the highlight. And I'm going to be hosting that again this year. This is like three years in a row now. So excited. Conscious Life Expo. Expo's Got Talent. So that's going down. And, of course, I'll be hosting all weekend and introducing people and things. So come and hang out with us at the Conscious Life Expo. All right. Let's jump straight into it. Everybody wants their own crystal skull. Yes, you do. And I realize that. There's only one place to go, and that is EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. Carolyn Ford has the best. And head over to EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. Use the promo code Jimmy for 10% off of your Crystal Skull order today. She's got the best. And I have something on its way. And it should be here, I think, tomorrow. I'm going to do another unboxing video. Yeah, I'm going to do another unboxing video. Very excited. Also, it's a little bit early to announce this. But I think I may be in Sedona in March. Now, I'm planning a vacation, and there's some stuff going down that weekend. So I may be doing something out there with a group of people. So I will announce that as we get things locked down. I've got some other things. I'm trying to shuffle all this other stuff, but I may be heading to Sedona, which also means I get to hang out with Carolyn Ford, too, as well. I let Carolyn know that I want to come over, and she goes, let's clink some crystals. I said, yeah. So that may be going down in March. I'll keep everybody posted. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. The Sandbox, which is live to my right in front of me, is hashtag F2B right there on Twitter. And any questions during the show, use hashtag F2BQ. Hello to everybody watching and listening all around the world. Let's get to the breaking news. Sad, announced yesterday. Bob Saget, the comedian and actor known as the Wholesome Patriarch, Danny Tanner on the sitcom Full House, has left this planet. Bob was found dead in a hotel room yesterday at the Ritz-Carlton Orlando, Grand Lakes, Florida. The Orange County Sheriff's Department released a death investigation report today, which stated they found no evidence of drug use or foul play in the otherwise orderly hotel room. He was just 65 years old. Also announced today, Robert Durst, the eccentric millionaire who fascinated viewers as the subject of HBO's documentary series The Jinx before being convicted last year of murder, has died in a California prison hospital of natural causes at 6:44 a.m. earlier today. He was 78 years old. And I guess we'll never find out what happened to his first wife. Yeah, there you go. All right. About 100 ostriches. Let me start that over because I started to laugh. About 100 ostriches on Friday broke out of prison. That's right. They broke out of their farm and paraded on the streets of Jiangsu City, Ganji province in China. Most of them have been captured, but about 20 are still at large, and it is about the funniest video I have seen in years. After heavy rain in Australia brought on by tropical cyclone Seth last week, a damaged levee system failed and caused water to inundate downtown Maryborough, Queensland. And a bull shark was spotted swimming in the murky waters in the city park in downtown. Sharknado comes to Australia. A crew of American sailors on the USS Sirocco, who were on a mission in the Gulf of Oman last month, rescued a group of mariners after their boat caught fire on the high seas. U.S. officials said the troubled mariners were a group of 5 Iranian nationals, and after they were saved, the crew from the Sirocco confiscated about $15 million worth of drugs from the Iranians' boat, including hashish, methamphetamine, and heroin. Yeah. Officials at the Rutland Wildlife Trust said today that they had uncovered the skeleton of an extinct prehistoric reptile predator known as a sea dragon, the largest and most complete ever discovered in the United Kingdom. Now, it's called an ichthyosaur, and that fossil measured over 32 feet long and has a 6-foot skull weighing around a ton. It lived about 180 million years ago during the Jurassic period when dinosaurs walked the land and apparently swam in the sea. Let's get the show cracking. Happy birthday to today. Rod Stewart is 77. Pat Benatar today is 69. Now, normally I go, what's your favorite Rod Stewart song? I'm going to go People Get Ready, but Maggie May, and you did that in one take, by the way. I get it. Pat Benatar, that's a little tougher for me. I like everything that Pat did. Oh, man. I'm going to let that go right there. Drum God, Ainsley Dunbar today is 76. Played for Frank Zappa, Jeff Beck, Journey, and of course, Jefferson Starship. Steely Dan's Donald Fagen today, 74 years old. And Guitar God, Michael Schenker, today is 67. Our dead guys' birthdays today, there's only one. Jim Croce, 1943 to 1973, died at the age of 30. Between 1966 and 1973, Jim released 5 studio albums. During this period, he had to take a series of odd jobs to pay the bills, feed his family, while he continued to write, record, and perform concerts. But he was broke. His breakthrough came in 1972 with his 3rd album, You Don't Mess Around with Jim, produced 3 charting singles, including Time in a Bottle, which reached #1 after his death. The follow-up album, Life and Times, contained the song Bad Bad Leroy Brown, which was the only #1 hit he had during his lifetime. Then on September 20th, 1973, at the height of his popularity and the day before the lead single to his 5th album, I Got a Name, was released, Jim and 5 others died in a plane crash. On this day in history, I'll never forget this. It was the year 2000. America Online Inc. announces plans to acquire Time Warner Inc. for $182 billion in stock and debt. The result was a $350 billion megacorporation, AOL Time Warner, which held dominant positions in every type of media, including music, publishing, news, entertainment, cable, and, of course, the Internet. In 2002, AOL Time Warner reported a quarterly loss of $54 billion, the largest ever for a U.S. company. 7 years later, Time Warner drop-kicked AOL in 2009. Fader fact. In 2019, scientists discovered the world's oldest known work of art on Sulawesi, an island in Indonesia. It was created 44,000 years ago. That's your Fader fact. Tonight we welcome very special guest Micah Hanks. Micah Hanks is here. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Here for a complete deep dive into DC UAPs in the year 2022. Tomorrow night, Emily Harrison, right here on Fade to Black. We're going to be discussing the Akashic Records. Wednesday night, it's Serena Wright-Taylor and Susan Slaughter and the 2022 Conscious Life Expo. Thursday is Fader Night. Yeah, we didn't have Fader Night last week. Linda Moulton House stopped by. This week, it's Fader Night with open lines all night long. All right, let me hit this River Moon coffee. Rivermoonwellness.com. Hit me with your best shot, Madeline says. That's her. Yeah, I know. I'm with you on that. I want to know where the Fade to Black came from. And Maria Clark didn't reply yet. Where did you get? I made a gift from. Oh, okay. Thank you. She made a gift from the American Horror Story intro. Thank you so much. Thank you. See, that's going to get a reply. Here, I'll let everybody see this. I'll even hashtag my reply because it's Monday. There you go. So everybody can see it. That's cool. Thank you for that, Maria. Very cool. All right. Rivermoonwellness.com. Yeah. All right. Man, good cup of coffee today. It's almost too strong. Is that possible? Not according to Micah Hanks. All right. Now, sometimes I just got to talk. Like right now. Sometimes I just got to let it rip. And here we go. For some reason, I have always been fascinated with the universe. Some of my earliest memories are about what is out there and the end of it all. I mean, I was probably 5 years old when I first had visions of a brick wall at the edge of things, right? Seriously. And I'm not sure what made me create this picture in my mind, this brick wall, but I've heard others speak of it too, which means that there must have been something on TV back then to cause the brick wall thing, but I've never stopped thinking about the universe. Now, although I continue with my research into the edge of everything and its expansion into infinity faster than the speed of light, I'm equally as intrigued about the opposite, the beginning of it all. I just finished Michio Kaku's new book. It's called The God Equation, which was, it's not that new. It was released back in April of 2021. And he covers all the normal stuff, right? Black holes, wormholes, portals to other universes, time travel, dark energy and matter. And for the first time, he talks about what was going on before the Big Bang. You see, most physicists won't talk about it. You know, what happened before the Big Bang? In fact, for the most part, they ignore it. They don't like to be asked about it. They don't, because they don't know. But Michio decided to at least bring it up. Good for him. But he didn't go far enough. He almost did, though. And I could tell He was right there, man. He was right there. He probably did some editing and removed what he really meant to say, but here's the deal. I challenge any physicist to at least agree that there was something before the Big Bang. To suggest that there was absolutely nothing before the Big Bang just doesn't make any sense. In that, time didn't start with the Big Bang. The age of the universe started, right? But time itself, nah, that's forever. As in forever. Time is truly infinite. So, what is 13.8 billion years in forever time? Nothing. What is a Big Bang in forever time? It's the same thing. It's nothing. Big Bangs have to have happened an infinite amount of times. And when ours happened, there must have been leftover stars, galaxies, matter, all sorts of things floating around from, well, another universe that was already there when the new stuff decided to explode. Listen to what I am saying. This is, in my opinion, the next subject to be explored in astrophysics. And to take things a step further, what if there was another Big Bang? Like right here, right now, in the middle of or next to our already expanding universe. Now, think about this. All that is needed for this to happen, you need some gravity. You need some high temperatures, really high temperatures. You need a few gases. You need some particles. And boom, you got yourself a Big Bang. As far as I can tell, all of the ingredients needed for the recipe are here and there, pretty much everywhere, all the time. Just like they were 13.8 billion years ago. And before that, and before that, and that, forever. And forever is a very long time. Seriously. When the Big Bang lit off, what was there? Blackness? Nothing? Ever? No. There was and is something else there. What if, and I'm not in any way being facetious, I'm being very serious. Big Bang goes off, and who's to say that it wasn't in the middle of a previous universe? Number one. Number two, rogue planets. Right? Not a couple. How about trillions? You know, a galaxy floating around from another universe that had expanded at the speed of light and then some, you know, rushing through our space in space. To suggest that there was nothing before the Big Bang is nuts. And Michio almost went there. Almost. To try to convince everybody that before the Big Bang there was nothing. Lawrence Krauss, now defamed and, you know, he's canceled and all of that. That's his own fault. But Lawrence, it was probably his last book, was titled Something from Nothing. And that's exactly what the book is about. That all of this came from nothing. And before that, nothing. I say they are wrong. And we now need to start talking about what was around before the Big Bang. And the possibility of another one happening at any time, because they have been going on forever in forever time. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Tonight, we welcome very special guest, Micah Hanks. He will be with us in a couple of minutes at the bottom of the hour. We are going to do a complete deep dive into Washington, D.C., all of it. The agencies, the military, the Department of Defense, the amendments, the NDAA, UAPs, and what is going to go down in 2022. Tomorrow night, right here, Emily Harrison joins us. First-time guest, by the way. We are going to be discussing the Akashic Records. That's right. What are they? Where are they? How do you get to them? What can you do with them? All of that tomorrow night. Then Wednesday night, Serena Wright Taylor and Susan Slaughter are with us. We're going to be talking about the 2022 Conscious Life Expo. Thursday's another Fader night with open lines all night long. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer and UNX Networks. I'll be right back with Micah Hanks after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net.
Introducing the Game Changer blend from Rivermoon Coffee that delivers a customized blend made specifically for the Fadernauts. If the game is rigged, change the game. It's a bolder cup with some bite. Game Changer is the coffee of choice for those that prefer an organic dark roast that is slightly lighter and milder, but it's still dark. With wild notes of pecans and chocolate with a rich, balanced, full-bodied cup that is roasted to perfection for a great coffee to start your day, as an after-dinner coffee or anywhere in between. Artisan, small batch roasted to perfection. USDA certified organic, all Rivermoon coffee is freshly roasted and packaged in the USA. Just go to rivermooncoffee.com or click on the banners over on our site and use the promo code F2B Blend for 15% off of your order today. rivermooncoffee.com.
This is the only way forward.
This is Fade to Black. Make contact.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, folks. It's troubling times, and fear is pushing emotions, which in turn pushes health the wrong direction. Do you ever get an ache because life is uneasy? Try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea works on your digestive tract, helping to move food through quicker and comfortably so your health is spot on. Life Change Tea may not help with world issues, but it will help with your digestive issues. A glass a day helps keep the intruders away. So, change your life today. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. If your health game is off, get on by ordering Life Change Tea. Getthetea.com. And while you're on our site, look around at the great non-GMO organic supplements. And if you're a sales shopper, go to our specials page and see what's for you. I've been drinking the tea for 12 years and I'm sure glad for its health benefits. Again, that's getthetea.com. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go.
The new KUNXDB, the UNX Network, bringing you the best in paranormal programming in premium, high-definition streaming audio and video. Log on to the network at unxnetwork.com and check out the growing lineup of programs, including Jimmy Church, Whitley Strieber, Micah Hanks, and many more. Sign up for the free UNX newsletter, follow the UNX blog, or pick up the latest edition of the UNX magazine. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. So check us out at unxnetwork.com. Tap the show page and the calendar so you never miss your favorite live shows and podcasts. We are your portal for all things paranormal. The X, explaining the unexplained.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks is here. It's going to be a barn burner, everyone. Yeah, big build-up. Big build-up. We call that in radio. Micah Hanks is here. We're going to be doing a deep dive in all things 2022 when it comes to UAPs. Lots to talk about. I've been following all of his research and articles on this. And I couldn't wait to get him on the show. And it took me 2 weeks to get a hold of Micah Hanks. Man, normally, I put out a phone call, I put out a text, I get a response in 15 seconds. It took 2 weeks to hear back from Micah Hanks. Yeah. Mike is a writer. He's a podcaster. He's a history fanatic. He's a science enthusiast. He's a philosophy junkie. His areas of focus include current events, Formula One race car driving. He is thoroughly into Formula One race car driving, antique guitars, and, of course, his family. He studies technology, unexplained phenomena, and the ways that the future of mankind will be influenced by innovation in the coming decades. He's the author of several books. He's been on Coast to Coast AM, Caravan to Midnight. He's got his own radio show. He's got his own podcast. He's written The Ghost Rockets, Mysticism, and the Molecule. You know what? I'm going to bypass all of this and say, you know what? That's the longest bio ever, and I've got to edit that thing down. Micah, how you doing, my brother?
I'm good, yeah. I mean, at this point, I was wondering why you don't just say, my brother from another mother, Micah Hanks. Y'all know him.
I know, right?
Now.
I know. See, and this is the other thing. I get nervous when you're on the show. And nobody makes me nervous like Micah Hanks does. You're a
look at you.
You're a professional. You've been at this for a very long time, and you're as cool as the cool side of the pillow, man. And your research. Now, this is. I kind of want to start off here, though. Your research has always been great, and I've followed you for a very long time. We talk about that enough, but. For you to continue and take it further and deeper with the debrief, I mean, I didn't think it was possible. But you guys, in very short order, have not only become a success, but you guys are what everybody is turning to now. That's a lot of pressure. Do you feel it? Do you feel smarter? Do you walk taller?
Well, no, I'm still the same shoe size, still the same height. You know, I'll tell you this. I remember when I was in my 20s, I would have those sensations. You know, I would read for an entire weekend and come away from, you know, a deep dive with some sort of a sense that I have now struck the main nerve, and I now know what it's all about. The older I get, the less I feel like I know, even though over time the amount of knowledge, you know, that I possess inevitably is growing. And I think that that's just something that comes with maturation. You know, the older you get, the more you realize that there's so much to this world to know, to learn. The more I'm exposed to that, the more information I take in, you know, the smaller I feel. Right, in the grand scheme of things. And so it's very cosmic experience at times, really a very humbling experience. As my debrief cohorts know, we joke about me going up on the mountain and sometimes disappearing for a few days, but I mean, in a very true sense, I'm like Luke Skywalker up there on the mountain. And as much as we joke about it, I mean, I have to take breaks and go and, you know, kind of find balance and kind of reconnect with, myself, right, through meditation and things like this, because, I mean, first of all, there's so much information. We are bombarded by media from every angle on every device that we have in our homes, in our pockets, in our cars. We are constantly being exposed to information. And, I think in order to really understand what's going on, you've got to be able to access that information, but then cut that off, turn that off, step away, and come back and go, okay, now what does it all mean? That's the part I think that a lot of people these days are kind of missing, in the sense that everybody stays on their devices. They stay plugged in. They are waiting for the next big news to drop so that they can tweet about it and be the first person to tweet about it and go viral. And, after a while, I mean, I get swept up in that just as badly as anybody else. But I mean, at some point I began to realize, and hear a guy, who co-launched this media site, which is trying to actually break stories and things. I mean, it's very paradoxical to be the person saying this, but I talk with Tim McMillan about this all the time. At some point I began to realize, there is the important side of news, the incredible importance, which I know this resonates with you, especially Jimmy. The importance of everything that has happened in 2021 and that is awaiting us as we move into 2022 with the UAP topic and with other things too. But then there's this side of it where it's like, are we more concerned about being that first person to go viral, the first person on Twitter to be able to retweet it, or are we really concerned with the magnitude of what's happening, the impactfulness of the events, what this all means for our lives outside of social media and the avatars that we have online that people recognize as being representative of us, right?
Right.
So I have to go up on the mountain. I have to meditate. I have to try and reconnect and go, okay, what does all this mean? And I got to tell you, 2021, I think, will be remembered as one of the most important years of our lives.
I agree. History's gonna look back at 2021 when it comes to actually world history in general, but certainly the UFO and UAP question. And before we move forward, I wanna back up about 10 years with you, where you seemed to, and I want you to take this the wrong way, okay? I want you to take this the wrong way. You seem to be very confident that you were starting to figure things out when it came to UFOs, and you had answers. How wrong were you? Here we are in 2022. And you know where I'm going with this. Yeah. It's so evolving and changing.
I think that, let's go back to 2012. Okay, back then, Ancient Aliens was really, really hot, and there was a lot of discussion about that. There was also a lot of discussion about UFOs. There always has been, especially within UFO circles. It only really kind of re-entered the mainstream in recent years. But in 2012, as much as everyone was really interested in this ancient parallel, this ancient analog for what may be this modern technological phenomena and whether we can find evidence of this. And again, that, notwithstanding the popularity of ancient astronaut theories before 2012, and of course that persists today, the Ancient Aliens program recently did an episode all about all the stuff we're going to be talking about tonight. Because,
again, they did. That was the premiere, actually. Yes.
Yes, indeed. And really, I mean, it's becoming contemporary aliens rather than ancient aliens. And, we won't get into foibles about the discussion of aliens. I'm comfortable with that term more so than I am extraterrestrial. I do see a distinction, but again, not to get lost in the minutiae. Back in 2012, again, I'd been looking at UFOs and thinking to myself, this is the direction I want to go. I see this as an important topic, but I think that there are a lot of presumptions that researchers who study this phenomena lead with, one of them being, therefore, aliens, right?
Right.
And in my opinion, I thought, let's set that presumption aside. Let's look at what the evidence actually suggests, and let's try to understand what we might be dealing with. Now, in 2013, I don't talk about this book all that much, but I mean, I wrote a book that was published in 2013 called The UFO Singularity. The initial idea had been I wanted to take a comprehensive look at UFOs, and I'd pitched an idea for a book. The actual proposal had been for a book called The UFO Reality. So I never disputed that there was a reality to the phenomenon. But the publishers came back and they said, we're really interested in your interest in artificial intelligence and the fact that you have a chapter in this book proposal that looks at that aspect. Would you want to just write a book about that? Because, nobody's done that at this point. Now, at the time, I thought, sure, okay, we can work on that. And the general premise had simply been this. First of all, if we are going to encounter travelers from another place, it seems to me that with the problems that a biological life form encounters, that it's very likely we would encounter, or be more likely to encounter, their artificial intelligence rather than the biological entities. If you look at some, and again, we got to be careful with these accounts, but some of the accounts of people who have claimed to have had contact with the occupants of the UAP, they sometimes describe them as being what we would call robotic. So I thought, okay, maybe that could be interpreted as interactions with nearly biological, maybe in their appearance, but an advanced form of AI. The other idea had been that if we're talking about machine intelligence, how would that machine intelligence interpret time? So I tried to look at all these things within the context of what, some futurists here on Earth in the here and now call the singularity, technological singularity. How soon will we no longer be able to understand the the distinguishing characteristics, I guess, between humans and human intelligence, and then machine intelligence that will eventually exceed us, perhaps self-replicate, self-improve, and then we have intelligence explosion, and we no longer recognize the superintelligence as advanced as it becomes, right? So anyway, I looked at all these things in the context of, if we encounter a intelligence that can bring itself across the great distances in space, it must be more advanced than we are. How much more advanced? If it's AI, could it be a machine superintelligence we're actually encountering? I think those points are all still valid, and in fact, I feel somewhat vindicated on account of the fact that many scientists who were very hesitant to ever engage the UFO subject, now that it's become mainstream and they are now coming out of the closet, because I don't doubt that they always had an interest, but now they feel like they can talk about it.
Right.
Many scientists writing, I'm seeing articles, Jimmy, in Scientific American talking about, well, it seems more likely that what we'll encounter is the artificial intelligence of the intelligence, behind the technology, not the actual creators of it. I'm thinking, well, thank you. You're very welcome. But there's the other side of it too, where in hindsight, I look back at that book and I think it was incomplete. It was a thought experiment. Could I have done better? Certainly. And after all of these years and after all of these developments we've seen since 2017, I'm kind of going, and yet maybe the phenomenon's far simpler than any of that. Maybe if they're so advanced, if indeed they are from someplace other than here, and we don't know for sure yet, but it seems to be a likely possibility, one worthy of exploring. Who's to say their technology doesn't employ wormholes or something else that would easily facilitate that travel over that distance? We don't have to rely on AI. So who knows, and I've had to come back around, Jimmy, to looking at an idea that has been with us since the beginning, which is the ET hypothesis. I don't rule out, nor do I necessarily endorse it, but I definitely look at it among the range of hypotheses because, again, we're dealing with something, and it's very difficult to reconcile in terms of simple Earth technologies. I certainly don't think all of this is just Russia or China.
Right. And it could be all of the above. More than likely, it's all of the above. It could be literally biological beings in a ship through a wormhole and crossing. It could be AI and traveling for tens of thousands of years and not aging, not worrying about food and those kinds of things, and those crafts are getting here. It could be us from the future. It could be interdimensional. It could be us here now. It could be a parallel world, or all of the above hitting us at the same time. And we think we're, zoning in on one thing, and then something else happens. And there's the reason why I go so firmly here is that it seems to me that no two UFO encounters or sightings are the same, right? Everything is different.
Right.
Everything is different. If we go out into the streets and look at the different kinds of vehicles that pass in front of you, dump trucks, buses, ambulances, cars, SUVs, motorcycles, bicycles, right? Everything that you can think of passes you in a couple of minutes, right? And different brands. And that's just on this planet. Well, it would have to be the very same thing with anything that would be visiting us, because we're talking about an infinite amount of civilizations, right? And they're not going to buy from the same dealership. It's not going to be the same type of travel. It's not going to be the same type of sighting. Not only the same type of craft, but how they got here and what we are experiencing with that. Everything is going to be different, right?
Certainly, yeah. And, back to your original question, I mean, how wrong do I feel? That's a very important point, and I think anybody who is worth their salt, periodically over time, will look at where they were and where they are and ask, okay, where have I come from? How have my opinions changed? Again, I still entertain all the old ideas that I had, but I think it's really important not to limit yourself to, and therefore that's what I think this is. A lot of people who read the book I mentioned, the UFO Singularity, and that's one reason I don't talk about that book all that much, is because I began to pick up on the fact that many people who read it, they interpreted that, well, he either thinks these things are all AI or he thinks that they're all time travelers, because I do get into the time travel thing somewhat in the book, more so. And again, in a short 55 to 60,000 words, it's difficult to articulate the depth of some of these ideas. But again, I tried to at the time. But the real premise for me was, if we're talking about a machine intelligence, which may not be as encumbered by entropic forces as a biological, brain is, then are we looking at something that might perceive time differently from us and might be able to get around some of the hindrances, not only of travel through space, but also maybe perception of time? That's what really interested me. And these sorts of conjectures also appear in certain writings of the likes of Ray Kurzweil and others when looking at machine superintelligence. So I was applying that to the UAP issue and going, okay, might this be something we should be thinking about too? But, of course, as it began to dawn on me that people would read the book and say, and Hanks thinks they're all time travelers, I'm like, well, I wouldn't rule out that possibility that some UAP may be, representative of atemporal phenomena or time travel. But like you said, we see all the different cars on the road, and we would not call a 18-wheeler a sedan, right? Nor would we call a Jeep a pickup truck, unless it is a Jeep pickup truck. We make these distinctions between all these different vehicles, but try showing those vehicles to somebody who's never seen an automobile, and they may recognize each different shape and size and brand as being a different kind of a monster or dragon or beast or machine, or contrivance. Think of all the different names we might apply toward that. The UFO phenomenon may be very similar, and those who are so beholden to an extraterrestrial hypothesis as being the only possibility will say, well, these aliens that travel in the Tic Tacs, they are from Zeta 2 Reticuli, whereas meanwhile we have from Tau Ceti, we have the alien grays and the saucers. And then no. It could be that we're looking at a range of different phenomena which we lump under the UAP umbrella, right? Some may actually be extraterrestrial visitation. Some may be time travelers from our future, or maybe from a distant period in the past, from an ancient alien civilization that actually harnessed time travel. Who knows? Maybe some are actually the operators of the Matrix intersecting with our reality from outside the simulation, and that their craft that we observe and think of as a UAP or a UFO, we perceive that as a physical object, but it's really actually a program. There are any number of different things, black budget programs that emanate from right here on Earth, not from out there. All these things could also be called or interpreted as UFOs without having to all be the same thing. And like you mentioned, Jimmy, that's a really good point. That might help account for why there are so many differences in descriptions, behaviors, activity, appearances, and all these things over the years.
Yeah, just my own personal experiences. I've interviewed and spoken with, thousands of people about this subject. And that's great. But just my own experiences, Micah, have been so vastly different from each other that they can't be the same thing. They can't be the same ETC, extraterrestrial civilization. It just can't be, if they are from out there. But that's what I base everything on. It's my own experiences. Everybody else is great, and I love hearing from them. But I'm still scratching my head on the stuff that I've seen myself. And it defies explanation. And that's what drives me to move forward. And there's another part to this, though. With your work at the debrief and looking at your content at the debrief that has been released, we don't know a whole lot in the UFO community, but we know a whole lot. Is it the same thing with the United States government, right? They may not know a whole lot, but yet they do know a whole lot.
You know, our good buddy, your friend and mine, Lou Elizondo, said something a while back in an interview where he noted that, and in fact, actually, it was our very own Chrissy Newton who was interviewing him for the debrief. Great interview that she did with Lou. And, she and I are hoping to team up and interview him together again in the months ahead because, again, Lou is a wellspring of knowledge about so many things. But something that Lou had said that struck me was that when Chrissy asked him about some of the incidents at nuclear sites, Lou had said, we actually followed up with the research of Robert Hastings, a civilian researcher, and he said, and thereafter we were able to confirm a lot of the information that he got right in his writings. Now, of course, Robert Hastings, he didn't work for any kind of Pentagon unit that investigated UAP. He was, like many other researchers before him, Barry Greenwood, Larry Fawcett, and others, he had been using the Freedom of Information Act to gain access to documents and to try and confirm and to extrapolate additional information. That also in addition to eyewitness testimony that was provided to him by very brave servicemen and women whom he interviewed and spoke with. And again, Hastings has really kind of done some of the definitive work on as the title of his book actually entails, UFOs and Nukes. But it struck me as very interesting that Lou, and I really appreciate Lou Elizondo for giving credit where credit is due. He always does that. And again, crediting a non-governmental source and saying, hey, look, no shame. We went and we got a lot of data from that guy's research. But what that also tells me, and why it's so important what Lou had to say about Hastings' research, is that seems to indicate to me that often government is interested in national security and the issues that directly affect national security. Now, if a UFO shows up over a nuclear base and it starts blasting lasers and blowing stuff up, that is an immediate concern. And frankly, in my opinion, any kind of UAP in the airspace over a sensitive facility, that should be an immediate concern. But what we seem to have learned, especially in recent years, is that the government takes the UAP issue seriously enough, but they don't appear to be gravely concerned about there being an imminent threat. Most of the threats are indirect. UAP can be a threat to aviators, for instance. UAP may be a challenge to national security, but they don't say we have detected that these things are hostile and we're very concerned about it, right? Big difference in what threat means and the different levels of threat, right? Threat versus indirect threat. UAP are more an indirect threat. And so I think that our military looks at this issue as being something that they want to know about because these things seem to have technological capabilities that exceed at least what we understand, if not actually what we possess. They also want to know what these things are when they are operating in sensitive military areas. And hence, of course, with the newly established AOI MSG by the Pentagon, what are they doing? They're explicitly looking at UAP in this special use airspace. We'll talk more about that later. But again, in terms of it being a direct threat, I don't see our government looking at this and saying we've got to protect the citizenry against these things. Meanwhile, Russia, China's militarization, right? War games out there in the Pacific, the ever-present threat of nuclear proliferation. These are more concerning threats to our military, and they look at those things first and foremost. And so I think it's very important that when the government is paying attention to the big concerns, the more imminent threats, civilian UFO researchers not only are doing some of the best work, but as Lou helped point out in the interview with Chrissy, the government at times will also source its information from the research those civilians do. So for the civilian UFO researchers who may be listening tonight and thinking, well, the government's now getting into the game and so our job's done. We just got to kick back and watch. Think again. It may still be the case that some of the best research and the most important headway we make will first emanate from the civilian sector, and that will give a cue to government with their inquiries in terms of where to look, what to look at, and how to approach these problems.
Now, there are many sources inside of the Bigelow circle. I'm just going to say Bigelow, whether you want to go A-tip or whatever. But that circle, the Bigelow circle, has implied multiple times, and that includes Lou Elizondo, that our government is in possession of craft not from this earth. Now, if that's the case, then they do know a whole lot, and they can't say that we don't know what's going on if they are in possession of technology that was created elsewhere.
Fair point. This kind of becomes an epistemological argument at that point, though, because we are left kind of asking, what do we know and how do we know what we know? And so when it comes to the idea of crash wreckage retrievals, for instance, how do we know whether the government has these? Now, a few sources that have at least implied that this may be a reality include, like you mentioned, Lou Elizondo. He's touched on that.
Eric Davis. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eric Davis. Ross Coulthart in his very interesting book, In Plain Sight, which I did read. Ross also spoke with a retired official who had said he had heard such rumors. And if you go through the literature, I mean, many of us have come across similar references to people who claim to, Annie Jacobson's writing. Now I think, in fairness, some of those claims are maybe more credible than others. But the running theme, and my big takeaway is this, that is a consistent motif in various literature related to UAP, that there have been wreckages and retrievals by military. Two, it seems to be something that is fairly persistent. And if so few as one of those incidents, let's say it's Roswell, right? If one represents reality and it actually happened, well, then somebody's got something. And yes, you're right, they would have to know something more about it. Now, does that mean that they have the full picture? Again, it may actually be the case that we are looking at a phenomenon that they still know little about, but which they managed to acquire. They have some data about, and they recognize, okay, this is a reality, and this is a big problem because we know so little about it. But we've got these things, they're on ice, and the only guys who know about it are the 12 sitting up there on the panel back in Washington in that bunker. Right. And we'll start to do the deep dive when we come back after the break. This specific point is addressed in the NDAA for 2022. And I think it was one of the most extraordinary paragraphs in any budget of any year, maybe in the history of the world. So let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Micah Hanks. And we are going to do tonight a complete deep dive into the UAP question, what is going on with Washington, D.C., and all of it, how it applies to 2022. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. More with Mike after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, BX.
This is Billy Carson with ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Forbidden Knowledge TV has just reached its 1-year anniversary. That's right, 1 year. And as a show of appreciation, we are giving all new subscribers a free 30-day trial of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's 30 days to binge watch thousands of movies, documentaries, conferences, workshops, lectures, yoga classes, meditation courses, and so much more. So log on to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv from your computer or mobile device, or get the Forbidden Knowledge TV app on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon, iTunes, or Google Play today, and use coupon code 30daysfree. That's coupon code 30 days free on ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Because you never got that pony you always wanted. Damn it. Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network.
Listen, I know, and you know, that you've always wanted your first crystal skull. Or maybe you're a collector just like me, but you just don't know where to go to find the real thing. Then I met Carolyn Ford over at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. Carolyn is the guardian of Einstein, one of the most respected ancient crystal skulls in the world. All of her unique skulls have been imprinted sitting with Einstein in his sacred lodge and are carved from the finest gemstone and materials. Imprinting is the process of receiving the ancient wisdom from the master skull or master computer. Einstein, the ancient crystal skull. To see Carolyn's current collection of crystal skulls, just visit her store at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com or click on the banner over on our site. Don't forget to use the promo code Jimmy at checkout to receive 10% off of your order today. That's promo code Jimmy. Finding your first or next crystal skull is easy. Just visit EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2B Blend for 15% off of your order today.
Hello, I'm Katie, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers. We're also Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hello, this is Serena Wright Taylor from Conscious Life Expo, and you're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who holds the Lucky Pony record for the best astrological chart since 1963. True story.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report. My guest tonight, Jimmy Church. I'll never change that. The way you say Gralien, I mean, with such authority, Mike, I will never change that. I've gone back and came. I'm like, no, that's going to stay right there. That's a moment in time, my friend. Earlier today, Micah and I were talking guitars. And Micah, I forgot to tell you, I just wanted to mention this before we move on. I have a miniature, it's like this big, right? A miniature Strat, okay? And it's painted in vintage white. It's a limited edition. Tiny, right? It's like 20-inch scale length or something. But anyway, it's a hardtail. Now, stay with me on this, okay? Mm-hmm. The guitar itself, $150, $175, brand new, okay? Mm-hmm. This guitar, I've just dropped $1,000 into, and it's at Pat Wilkins' shop right now. This is what's being done. It's getting new frets, Dunlop 6100s, $150 guitar, a new neck, a new nut, and I've had it routed for a tremolo. So the whole thing is going to be redone with a tremolo and Yngwie pickups. So, and new locking machine heads. The whole thing is going to be a miniature Yngwie Strat. And it's going to be done in about a month. But it's the craziest project ever.
Yeah, and I know exactly what Graham Hancock would say about that. He would say, why go to all the trouble
I'm going to. I have a friend. I'm going to have Yngwie sign it. Yeah, that's going to be in a few months, and I'm really looking forward to that, man.
Look, would you do me a favor? Would you do me a kindness if you do that? You ask old Yngwie if he likes donuts, okay? You do that for me, church.
Croissants. He likes croissants, man.
I figured he was a croissant guy. Yeah.
He's a croissant guy. I've been watching videos of him lately. Whew. You know what, though? He can still do the splits on stage. I don't know how he pulls that off. I really don't.
Yeah. And by how he pulls that off, you mean those leather pants, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
At the end of the day, after the gig, I mean, this defies physics. No, all kidding aside, look, man, I've always been a huge Yngwie fan. That guy can do on a Stratocaster, scalloped frets or whatever,
Yes.
Fretboard, I should say. And have you ever tried? I'm sure you have.
I do. I have a couple. Yes.
Yeah. Dude, I have never been able to get used to the scalloped fretboard thing. That is so strange. But again, the story, as I've been told, is that he used to work in a music store, and that a lute of some kind, and like a several 100-year-old instrument, came through, and he actually felt that, and he said it required such precision playing that instrument. And yet he saw the potential there, and he did it to his Stratocaster. Could you imagine that? I mean, that's a real dive. Once you go there, you can't go back. Well, maybe with wood putty you could, but it wouldn't really be the same. And he took that chance, and I saw a lot of Strats come through the old music store where my dad taught when I was a kid, and people would maybe start at the 12th fret and go up from there. But I think Yngwie does the entire fretboard.
I don't have it here. It's out getting painted right now. But I have a Takamine. Takamine has made solid body guitars back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And they were all made in Japan at the Jackson factory in Japan. Very high quality. Anyway, so I have a Takamine Explorer. It's called a GX100. And I've got it out right now. It's getting painted and stuff. But that guitar has a scalloped fretboard, and it's to the extreme. It's just out getting painted right now. But when it comes back, I'll take some pictures of it and send it to you. I've got rainbow hardware that's going on it, and some new pickups, and it's getting painted fluorescent lime green. The total 80 with the scalloped fretboard. This Takamine, it's a very rare guitar. And I'm going full 80 Sunset Strip on this thing. So I'll have it back in about a month, and I'll take pictures and send it to you. Now, let's get to, right before the break, we were talking about crash retrievals. And so let's jump into the NDAA. Because in the NDAA, this budget, by the way, this budget is listed 2022 through 2026. And I found that interesting. Okay, so it's not just for 1 year. But in the NDAA, there is a paragraph that specifically addresses UAP crash retrievals. Okay, and reporting the crash retrievals and the technology that they get from those crash retrievals. Now, I bring this up, A, that it is in there, and I find that shocking, but B, I think it's in there because of the ODNI, the efforts of Chris Mellon, too, as well, and possibly Lou Elizondo to get this wordage in there. That I think the ODNI found out that there may have been some crash retrievals that different agencies knew about, but it never made it over to ODNI, and they were caught by surprise with certain issues on UAPs, crash retrievals being one of them. Now it is part of the legislation. How did you take that when you saw that make its way into the NDAA?
Well, so first and foremost, there's a lot to unpack here, and I think I'm going to go in reverse order. There was an NBC article that my colleague Mark Brady sent me just within the last couple of days. And, they are kind of, hitting all of the the local joints along the path down the block home. Then they stop in and talk with Stephen Bassett, and they stop in and they talk with all these other, commentators. And then toward the end of the article, it's Mick West. And Mick had said about the NDAA, and again, for anyone who is, out of the loop and wondering what we're talking about the fiscal year for 2022 National Defense Authorization Act. This is a bill that is passed. There is both a House and then a Senate version that are passed. And once they reach agreement on those and the amendments package that are applied to this, once it passes into law, then it is, actually officially signed into law by the president. And this, for the last 60 years, has passed every year. So there was never a point where we didn't think that this would actually be passed into law. There was a little bit of a hang-up back around the holidays because Senator Marco Rubio of Florida had a very important issue regarding a small group of Muslims who have been, oppressed in a region of China. And he was, again, long story short, doubling down on an amendment to be added, which would essentially ban imports from that region as a sort of, sanction of sorts against China. Now, the problem is there wasn't widespread, I'm sure that there was widespread bipartisan support about that issue, but not on the insistence that Rubio had on the inclusion of that amendment. So what happened was the NDAA ended up going back to the House and then comes back to the Senate. They finally get approval for the bill. It actually passed much sooner than I expected that it would, and then was signed into law earlier this year. Much to my surprise had been the fact that one of the amendments that was included in the final amendments package, and I've got to give a hat tip to Douglas Johnson of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. He is a colleague of mine. He and I, of course, keep in touch pretty frequently, and he definitely keeps me up to date on what's going on and often writes very lengthy analyses of these developments at his blog, which is a very valuable resource to all of ufology or UAPology, whatever you want to call it. I still like ufology myself. And so it was very surprising to me that this so-called Gillibrand-Rubio amendment, because, again, the aforementioned Senator Marco Rubio also co-sponsored this amendment to the bill. And, in fact, it was very similar to a previous version from the House that Representative Gallego from the House had also put forward. So there were several versions of it, in other words. And once this passed into law, I mean, it was all the more made even stranger, the fact that we have this incredibly, and like you mentioned, this being one of the most significant pieces of legislation we've seen really in all history. It was the most, and I think really truly I've never seen anything quite like this, the most elaborately worded legislation regarding any kind of unusual topic, especially related to UAP, that I've ever seen in any kind of, legislation or law ever.
Ever. No, you can say that as fact. Ever. I don't think it's ever been written into legislation before. Not before we say not like this. No, I'm saying ever.
Now listen, here's
it's never been done.
A couple of important things to talk about, as a lead up to this. The history of UFO investigations by government goes all the way back to 1948 with the establishment of Project Sign. It was somewhat sympathetic to the idea that, hey, there's something in the skies. We want to know what these things are. After a few months, there were no conclusions drawn. And the successor to Project Sign was a project called Project Grudge, which was much more skeptical. Now, it formally ended, I believe, in late 1949, but informally continued until about 1951, toward the end of 1951. And then its successor, 1952, sees Project Blue Book come into fruition. The first head, of course, Edward Ruppelt, wrote a very comprehensive book about his early work with Project Blue Book. This was actually the book called The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. That was a term he coined, and hence why we still use to this day UFOs, some of us. But all that said, you had those three projects. Blue Book ran until 1968, and then we have a lull period where there is no formal acknowledged UAP investigation by government. Many people have supposed that there may have been limited investigations. If there was ever anything akin to what we saw then or what we are now seeing, it was kept off the books, to my knowledge. Now, of course, there was John Alexander's informal group, the ATP, the Advanced Theoretical Physics Project, which the acronym is actually slightly similar to ATIP, but it was not something that, like, within the Pentagon was actually analyzing these things. This was a group of professionals with certain levels of clearance who were independently looking at all this stuff. You and I have talked about John Alexander a little bit on the
yes, we have
on the show in the past. But I mentioned that again because that would have been the only other iteration of what we know as far as UAP investigative groups within government, and that was an informal one, much like ATIP was, apparently. ATIP, as reported in 2017 by the New York Times, which actually had referenced, in terms of where the actual $22 million that was appropriated by Harry Reid et al., that actually referenced the ALSAP program, slightly different. That was run out of the DIA. So not to get lost in the weeds here, again, that's the brief history, the family tree, you might say, of UAP investigations by government. And what we saw was the informal ATIP initiative that Lou Elizondo headed kind of carried over into the UAP task force, and then the UAP task force was sort of reassigned and carries over into what now the Pentagon identifies as the AOI-MSG, Airborne Office. What is it? AOI. Let's see if we can remember all the breakdown here. Airborne. Okay, never mind. We'll come back around to that in a minute. So anyway, they've got their thing, right? Their office.
Very serious. That's about the most dramatic thing, and I think it's because they know that this has been going on, but they haven't had reports on it. They don't know who has captured what. They don't know who is in possession of what. And now this is going to get reported to Congress.
Right. Now, again, I think we should be really careful when we read that. And again, like you mentioned in the wording, updates on efforts to capture or exploit discovered UAP is very different from assuming that we already have captured it and we want what they already have, right? But Mick West, when quoted by NBC recently and asked about this in the article I'd been referencing earlier, this is one of the issues he raises. He says, well, it seems that what was passed into law in the NDAA is pretty heavily influenced by UFO believers. And so now the Pentagon's going to have to jump through some silk hoops, essentially, to try and, get to the bottom of whatever they're trying to do, which is very important work. This is really interesting in itself to me because I'm like, okay, well, for the guy who has been arguing for years now that what appears in the Navy videos are mundane objects, that this is a distant, commercial airliner or this is a friendly FA-18. Now he's saying, well, but the work that they're actually trying to do with the OIMSG, this is really important. And I'm thinking, well, has your tone changed at all, Mick? I mean, is he now saying, we now have a investigative body that is looking at aerial incursions in special use airspace, and this is because apparently there are, as outlined in the ODNI report from last June, 144 instances where there were objects that our military couldn't identify, but which in many cases we have multi-sensor data in support of the reality of those observations, not just people saying they see things. Again, I hope that based on what he said, Mick is recognizing that whatever UAP are, if you're uncomfortable with the ET idea, again, I keep that one at arm's distance, but I keep it within sight because it's one among the range of possibilities. But whatever you may think or think they are not, let's look at the reality that this is an issue that our military is taking seriously. That alone should be indicative of why everyone else should at very least say, hey, okay, there appears to be a there there. If there was ever any doubt about that before now, I think we can all agree on one thing. Whatever the range of possibilities about what UAP are, we can all agree there's something worthy of study. Several somethings, probably. So again, to see Mick pointing out the fact that, but the NDAA language seems to have been heavily influenced by, the UFO proponents. Well, okay, sure. I get it. I would even agree to an extent, but I, unlike Mick, probably don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And this comes back to what we said earlier about what Lou Elizondo said about Robert Hastings' work, right? Civilian UFO researchers, and this is something actually that even Stephen Bassett echoes in the article. He notes, I don't think there's anything wrong with the AOI-MSG. I don't think that the ASRO is part of a conspiracy. This isn't part of some black ops to cover all this stuff up. Stephen Bassett's saying, I think this is all the result of 70 years worth of work by thousands of people who have, borrowing his famous term, you know it, you love it, to end the truth embargo. Now, of course, Bassett's all in, completely on ET as far as that is what the UAP represents. These things are extraterrestrial craft. He's told me that in interviews over the years. You too, I'm sure. Again, I would draw the line there and say I think that there are other possibilities worthy of consideration, but I think Bassett is also correct in the sense that, there has been a lot of work put toward getting us to this point. So again, don't miss the fact that the efforts of those civilians who Mick West says have, heavily influenced the wording in this amendment to the NDAA, those amendments are worded that way because of, again, decades of work by thousands of individuals. It has been a collective effort over time, and that has been based on a preponderance of data collected by civilian investigators, and some of that also coming from government sources, having been obtained through Freedom of Information Act, and also in some cases, government officials who have come forward themselves and talked about their own observations, experiences, or interests. So again, if you look at the deeper historical picture, it's not just a bunch of wacky people saying, yeah, go study aliens. No, we're looking at a body of data which I think has well informed and put in place at least some semblance of a plan with the Gillibrand Amendment to enable the ASRO to do a better job investigating UAP than any previous iteration of government investigative groups. That at least I hope, Jimmy.
Well, putting Mick West aside and his opinions, I think his research is actually pretty solid. But putting that aside, what I am curious about is why the capture and exploit and crash retrieval of UAPs made it into the NDAA. Because if we go back to the statements and why the Senate would make sure that this is included in there. Because if we go back to the New York Times article with Eric Davis, buried in the article, Eric Davis says, and the quote is attributed to Eric Davis and vetted by the New York Times, where he says that he briefed the Senate Intelligence Committee and told them that we are in possession of crafts not made here on Earth. Now, the Senate hears that. Did they follow up and go, what was Dr. Davis talking about? Who has got what? Are we in possession of it? And if we are in possession, why aren't there reports about it? And why aren't we hearing about it? And therefore, this verbiage, I keep saying verbiage, wordage, is now included in the NDAA. I don't think it has anything to do with UFO researchers or believers. I think that the Senate made sure that this was included in the bill for a reason.
There is, of course, always the possibility that members of the Senate Intelligence Committees have been briefed on more information about UAP and more information collected by government agencies than you or I know about. Again, case in point, the ODNI report that you or I saw is 6 pages long. Well, 6 pages, then there's the cover sheet, and then there's the 2 appendixes in the back. So again, 6 pages of content. And John Greenwald, of course, was immediately following that, trying to get to the bottom of, okay, how long was the one that the Senate saw? It was like, 15, 16, 17 pages? It wasn't much longer. The point is, of course, there was a little more information that was supplied to members of Congress. And, of course, there were briefings. We know, of course, that briefings occurred, that FBI personnel also attended. You or I didn't get to see all that. So, sure, I'm certain that they have actually had access to some information that we have not. But the questions, of course, thereafter are, well, how much information? What were Dr. Davis's sources with respect to Dr. Davis, of course? And again, I mentioned Ross Coulthard earlier, his book In Plain Sight. He does an entire chapter trying to kind of wade through all the questions about the so-called Wilson memo, right? And, trying to get to the bottom of some of the ideas as expressed in that and, how Dr. Davis's interpretations might be interpreted. Ross came essentially to the same conclusion that I have. And I know that some of our colleagues, like Richard Dolan, may differ on this point. But again, for me, at the end of the day, I have to kind of look at that and go, well, we probably won't know. Neither Eric Davis nor, of course, Admiral Wilson, neither of them come out and admit, yeah, that conversation happened. All the information that we talked about, that's all accurate. Here's where the information came from. There are a lot of, threads left kind of dangling from that. And so when Eric Davis says, yes, I briefed Senate, And, we know that there have been recoveries and things. What's the source for that information? Where does that come from? Where's the evidence that helps us establish that as a reality and not merely a conjecture?
I've got to take a break right here, but sure. I spoke to Ralph Blumenthal on this program about that specific point. And he said, Jimmy, I'm paraphrasing. He said, Jimmy, all I'm going to say is that the New York Times did their due diligence and vetted that quote. And that's how it made it into the New York Times. Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks. We've got a lot more to break down in this NDAA and what it means for 2022. We'll do all of that after this short break. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
This is Jimmy Church, and I personally invite you to the 2022 Conscious Life Expo this February 4th through the 7th, live at the LAX Hilton in Los Angeles, California. This year, we have the most exciting speakers, including Whitley Strieber, Adam Apollo, Billy Carson, Daryl Anka and Bashar, William Henry, Caroline Corey, Susan Slaughter, Daniel Brinkley, JJ and Desiree Hertog, Sarah Breskman Cosme, George Noory, Gail Thackeray, and many, many more. I will be hosting all weekend long, including the keynote Ancient Secrets panel on Friday night, 5 vendor and exhibit halls, 3 floors of speakers, panels, and celebration. This is the biggest event of the year, and early bird passes are available now. Just go to ConsciousLifeExpo.com for the schedule, speakers, and information. That's ConsciousLifeExpo.com. Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Fadernauts. When you think about the future of our country and where we're headed, do you wonder about the food supply? I do. Disruptions in the food supply chain could be disastrous, and they usually occur with little warning. That's why the smartest thing you can do today is to stockpile emergency food, water, and other essentials. I personally recommend My Patriot Supply. They're the nation's largest emergency preparedness company, serving millions of customers for more than a decade. In fact, they're the only source my family trusts for our preparedness plan. You should too. Right now, save 20% off a full 4-week supply of delicious meals that provide 2,000 calories a day. Saving 20% helps too, doesn't it? Especially now. So go to preparewithjimmy.com and get ready. That's preparewithjimmy.com. There's no time to lose. Do it now.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks is with us. Tomorrow night, Emily Harrison is here for the first time. We're going to be discussing the Akashic Records. Wednesday night, Serena Wright Taylor and Susan Slaughter are with us to talk about the 2022 Conscious Life Expo. Then, of course, Thursday night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. Tonight, Mike and I are discussing Washington, D.C., and UAPs in 2022. And going back to the NDAA, one of the points that I wanted to mention was this crash retrieval aspect that was in the NDAA, not addressed in the Gillibrand addition to the NDAA. Now, one of the concerns, and then I'm going to go through the points, the bullet points of the Gillibrand Amendment, but one of the things that are stressed by both Marco Rubio and Gillibrand are that, A, that we have full bipartisan support on the UAP issue on both sides of the aisle. I think that's very interesting how they are stressing that this is a national thing. This isn't anything that's partisan, number one. But number two, both Gillibrand and Rubio and others, I've got many quotes from different legislators about this, is that they are making sure that all 17 of the intelligence agencies work hand in hand and share information with all the branches of the military and then in turn to Capitol Hill and report on that. Has anybody ever played in the sandbox together in the past?
Well, I was going to word it differently, Jimmy. I was going to say I'll believe it when I see it. Again, if you recall Brian Bender, even prior to the issuance of the UAP Task Force's report, right, to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, if you look at what Brian Bender reported, there had been the perception in Washington that the UAP Task Force, again, a task force of, what was it, 2 individuals, who had day jobs, but in their spare time were supposed to be collecting information from these agencies about UAP and what the government knew about it. And they said that they felt that they were being stiff-armed by some of these intelligence agencies, which did not appear to want to have to provide the information that they'd collected that had to any kind of relationship to UAP. Something that's really interesting is if you go back and you look through some of the literature from over the years, you do get little gleanings about what the government's attitude and what different agencies' attitudes are toward this topic. In Forbidden Science Volume 3 by Jacques Vallée, he is expressing at some point in the mid-1980s some opinions, I guess, about this would have been the Advanced Theoretical Physics project that John Alexander was putting together. Presumably Kit Green, and of course Hal Puthoff and a lot of guys were kind of in that circle, and I think it had been Hal who was talking to Vallée about it, and Vallée was pretty skeptical about it, and he's in his private journal making some notes and saying, there's this meeting in Washington of these people, and he's, again, kind of like, well, yeah, I won't hold my breath. And throughout his journal, he maintains that attitude, but at one point he says, this meeting occurred apparently the other day. Hal was like a part of this. Maybe Kit was there. And the ironic part was that the thing that everyone at the meeting had in common was that they had all, in their various agencies or lines of work, they had encountered signals that could not be identified. But none of this had directly to do with UFOs. Right? In other words, everybody who was there talking about UFOs, they weren't directly looking at UFOs. What they had in common was the fact that unrecognized signals having to do with, again, what some might interpret as being related to UFO phenomenon, they had all experienced these things in some presumably technological capacity. I find that really interesting because, again, this reminds me also of the famous Citizens Against UFO Secrecy battle against the NSA back a few decades ago, where there was a lawsuit filed against the NSA to try and get them to have to release their UFO documents. And of course, if you recall, a district judge ruled in favor of the NSA, saying that, the information that they are withholding, although it might be of great interest to the UFO community, and in truth, there may be some benefits to that being released, that interest is not greater than the national security interest that the NSA is, expressing to us in terms of how important it is that that information not be released, and thereby that information we feel should be kept secret. Now, of course, at least the affidavit, I believe, that, kind of explained all this, various versions of it, each with a little more information unredacted, have been released over the years, and it gives us an idea of what the NSA was withholding. Yeah, they may from time to time gather information on unknown, uncorrelated targets and things, different terms that they use for it. But a lot of the time, the way that they collect that information and other information tangent to the UFO itself, they're like, no, we don't want people knowing that. We don't want our enemies knowing anything about that. We are going to fight to our last breath to keep that information withheld. And so the frustrating part, even for the UAP task force, and especially for civilian UFO researchers who love to know what the government has, is that in likelihood, a lot of this stuff probably won't be released because these agencies want to protect their methods, their ways, their means, all these kinds of things. And so, yeah, in my opinion, not only do they not play along with each other because of that, there is very little chance that this information is going to be released to us, and I doubt sincerely that even certain investigative agencies within government are necessarily going to have an easy time getting access to it, no matter what the House and the Senate try to pass into law.
Well, Rubio says here, he says, it is my hope that the creation of the new Joint Defense Department Intelligence Community Office focused on UAPs will provide the resource, the analytics, and attention needed to determine what is loitering around in our airspace. So, again, who is going to make sure that the different intelligence agencies are sharing their information over with the Pentagon, the military, and the Department of Defense to establish this report to present to Congress twice a year?
Yeah, that's a good question. Even prior to the passing of the NDAA, I'd also had a concern about whether or not information collected by the AOI MSG would necessarily be provided to Congress and whether there would be a whole lot of transparency there. So, of course, as I do, I was writing an article about this at the time over there at the debrief, and I wrote to the Pentagon, and Department of Defense spokesperson Susan Goff got back in touch with me, and I want to quote from the statement she provided me back in, I guess this was late November, early December maybe. And she said, regarding your question, first I'd like to note for you, well, let me skip ahead to the specifics. She said, quote, the department is committed to transparency with the Congress and the American people while balancing its obligation to protect classified information. In executing the AOI MSG mission, the department will keep the Congress fully and currently informed in both unclassified and classified detail of its activities and findings to enable effective congressional oversight and accountability to the public. The department is eager to work with Congress as it completes its fiscal year 2022 legislation to posture the AOI MSG for success. Regards, Susan Goff. That's what she wrote to me. Now, again, if taken at face value, this would seem to indicate that the Pentagon has every intention of keeping the Congress fully informed. I did find it interesting that she said very specifically both unclassified and classified, which would seem to leave open for the possibility that there may be some level of future reporting that the public will have access to, similar to the sanitized public version of the ODNI report from June issued by the UAP task force. But again, the problem I have with the AOI MSG is, despite the fact that a Pentagon spokesperson wrote that to me in response to my concerns and questions, on the other side, we also haven't seen anything in writing from an official government source apart from her response to me as a journalist. Whereas with the Gillibrand Amendment to the NDAA, we have in writing exactly what Senate expects from this UAP investigative group within government, which it outlines before it actually is instituted, you see. So again, this coming actually from our representatives who we elect to represent us, that's a big difference on the one hand from the Pentagon, and again, what we might call a more bureaucratic element within government, simply establishing an office, which really, again, as Lou Elizondo and others have pointed out, this within an agency where there isn't really any oversight, right? So we're seeing this just kind of by appointment, and apart from what I have been told as a journalist, we have no real assurances passed into law that there is going to be the kind of accountability and oversight and transparency that we're asking for.
Does there need to be a UAP czar? No, I'm being very serious. Somebody to make sure that oversight between those 17 intelligence agencies, that there is a point of contact, and they are indeed giving their information and filing those reports as needed to get to the central point between the DOD and the agencies, and that this information is collected.
Well, I might like to see that. I don't know how likely it is that everyone in government is going to see that as being a necessity. Again, if the only concern that our, representatives had was UAP, the NDAA wouldn't have been held up in the Senate on account of, an issue over Marco Rubio wanting a particular amendment added. This is what ended up being a stalemate. And obviously to him, and, I can understand from the perspective of an elected official, that issue being more important to him and to presumably his constituents and maybe to his political party also than the UAP issue. Back to your earlier point, what is also interesting, as you noted, is the fact that I have seen very little partisan bickering about UAP. It seems to have been almost, there are going to be some naysayers and some people who are kind of status quo holdouts who will hear nothing about little green men and anything that they even tangentially relate to that. But among those who have supported this issue, there seems to be bipartisan support to the fullest. And even some people like Adam Schiff, who have, seemed underwhelmed in their earlier statements about their briefings on UAP, have later come out and issued statements about it on their website following the passage of some of this legislation, which definitely seems to convey to me, and really, I think more broadly, should convey to all Americans and people around the world, that the United States government, they are not treating this along partisan lines. They all seem to be in agreement that if we're going to look at this issue, let's look at it and let's really go all in and treat it very seriously. Now, another issue, of course, I think that you'd mentioned had been the idea of a UAP czar. We don't have that, but there are actually a couple of different mechanisms that are supposed to provide oversight. In the case of the AOI MSG, we have the even more, how shall we say, the velvet word choice that they have employed in their attempts to create these memorable names. We have the Airborne Object Identification and Management Executive Council, or AOI MEXEC. Say it 3 times fast, ladies and gents. That, again, is supposed to be an oversight committee or council that will provide, oversight and counsel to the AOI MSG. The ASRO also has asked for one, but again, once we see the actual amendment, we learn very quickly exactly what they hope for, which is to have members of the Galileo Project, headed by Avi Loeb of Harvard University. A couple of members from that group. We also have the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. I'm a member of that group, just an associate member, by the way. But again, I've supported their efforts for a long time, to the point that I joined. Our organization also is supposed to have a couple of members on the oversight committee that provides counsel to the ASRO. And, of course, also members, I think, of the National Science Foundation, NASA, all these other different agencies. I've probably got a list around here somewhere, but take my word for it. There is a wide swath of people from intelligence and from different scientific organizations, and some, of course, whose specialty, like with SCU members, is UAP studies, that are supposed to be providing their oversight and providing their counsel to the ASRO. Now, that to me is extremely hopeful. It may not be a UAP czar, but again, that's the closest I think we're going to get.
Well, Gallego said this, and I quote, "Right now, our system of tracking and identifying UAPs is scattered throughout the Department of Defense and other departments and agencies of the federal government. Based on briefings I've received as chairman of the House Intelligence and Special Operations Subcommittee, I firmly believe that the Department of Defense and the intelligence community need to come together and create a permanent, synchronized structure to collect and analyze UAP data. I'm excited that the amendment I introduced alongside Senator Gillibrand was included in the final version of the NDAA." So they are clearly addressing this issue. But I believe that there needs to be somebody appointed to make sure that you can't trust the intelligence community to give up information. You've got to pull the information from them, and that needs to be done. And there needs to be somebody appointed to make sure that this happens.
You know, what's paradoxical about that is that there, on the one hand, is the side of, intelligence agencies sharing information with each other. And I often reference a book called Secrecy by the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, which, again, having nothing to do with UAP, looks at this very issue and the problem of sharing intelligence. He actually relates it to 9/11 and how that, again, horrible terrorist act, carried out against Americans on American soil might have been prevented had there been better intelligence sharing, among other things that he addresses in that book. But on the other hand, it's fascinating to me that I've filed FOIA requests with different agencies in government, and from time to time, they will write back to me in their preliminary responses and say, we're going to need some time getting back to you on this request, Mr. Hanks. And one of the reasons is because the information you are requesting from us is actually held by other agencies with whom we must first actually correspond to ensure that we have the ability to release the information they provide to us, to you. So their actual reasoning for either staving off or perhaps eventually denying a request to me as a journalist has to do with the fact that they say that they have to coordinate with other branches of government. So on the one hand, they don't seem to be sharing enough. On others, it's rather convenient at times that they can say, well, we'd give this to you if it was just us and we could just clear it for release, but we got to check with all these other agencies. We'll get back to you in 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. And going back to the collection of data, that is one of the bullet points in the Gillibrand Amendment, the collection and analysis of data into a central repository. The UAP office will supervise the development and execution of intelligence collection and analysis regarding UAPs in order to understand their technical and scientific characteristics. The UAP office will receive relevant data immediately from the intelligence community agencies. It's spelled out there clearly there.
It is. You're absolutely right, and I sincerely hope that the intelligence community will respond on these issues and maybe see at least certain aspects of this as being apart from their primary missions where they are collecting data and, again, tangent to the information that they're collecting and the reasons that they have for collecting that data. When UFO information is collected, oh, look, there was something there that we can't identify. I hope that information will be passed along as outlined in the wording there that you mentioned. That, to me, is hopeful. And again, this is why I think it was so important that there be a legislative process that passes into law the establishment of an organization, like if it ends up still being called the Anomaly Surveillance and Resolution Office, as the Gillibrand Amendment initially proposed. Whatever they name it, the key here is that we have the distinction here of this being passed into law, and again, the essentially mandate for this to be enacted as was passed into law by the NDAA earlier this year versus the simple appointment of something within the Pentagon that is thereby thereafter announced. And we have no idea, apart from what they tell us, how it will function, how it will be managed and how information will be passed on to Congress, when information is collected by the organization. Now, my hope is that now with two agencies, the group within the Pentagon, the AOI, MSG, and then the ASRO, different information in different spheres, different areas of government for different purposes will be collected. And that overall, it may actually provide a more comprehensive picture. But again, the question will thereafter be, well, how much information trickles down to the public? Now, I think with the ASRO, much like with the ODNI report, we're supposed to get some kind of reports. And based on what Susan Goff clarified for me, unclassified information collected by the AOI MSG passed on to Congress presumably would thereafter be able to be accessible either through direct release or perhaps through appeals via Freedom of Information Act. But again, it still comes back to us as civilian researchers doing what Robert Hastings did years ago. He has to file requests and he has to go after information. And I wonder how many more textbooks on UAP investigations will be written by Pentagon study groups based on civilian data that was collected, having to work from the outside, right? I remember talking a while back in an off-the-mic discussion with Lou Elizondo, and he had been explaining to me, this is the very reason why I left government and had to come into the civilian sector. I asked him, I said, how could you possibly do more as a civilian researcher than when you were in government with the, access and the resources that you had as a government employee? But I mean, over time, it becomes more and more clear to me that with an issue like this, as stigmatized as it is, and with all of the problems concomitant ideologically, socially, scientifically, technologically, and otherwise, concomitant with the study of a topic like UAP, as complex as UAP is, a tremendous amount of the information is going to have to be collected by civilians, scientists. Again, I'm very hopeful for what Avi Loeb hopes to do with the Galileo project. I almost said Galago. We're talking about the congressman.
Yeah, right.
The Galileo project. I'm very hopeful that he and his, fellow scientists who are now taking this issue seriously, that they can do exactly what he has said, which is, look at the skies. The skies, unlike government, are not classified. And when we reach that limit to how much information we can glean from government about this phenomenon, the scientists need to pick up the game there, and they need to continue forward and say, okay, and from this point on, we are going to do the work. We're going to get the information, and we're going to make that publicly available. We, the people, ladies and gents, have a right to know.
That's right. That's right. And we'll talk about those reports when we come back after the break. But the question that I have is, how classified is classified? In that, even the classified information that does make it to Congress, there will be a point where some of those agencies are going to say, we can't go further. That's classified, right? Above and beyond what is told in the classified section to Congress, that there will be stuff that those agencies will clearly say that's classified.
Right. Absolutely. That reminds me of something else too, Jimmy. Another question that, at the debrief, something we've discussed, kind of behind the scenes, and a question that I personally have had too is, if you look at the ODNI report, okay, most of the information that appears in that report, even though we're only given a very, very general synopsis, none of the actual details are provided. And again, something I definitely take pride in the fact that, as we have reported on this since our founding with the debrief, we, I think, have illuminated some areas that in likelihood, in fact, it's actually been confirmed to us by the Pentagon in at least one instance that I know of, but probably more, that there were materials that were not specifically referenced in the ODNI report that we know had been within the purview of what the UAP task force had been looking at. One example, of course, had been the footage that had been associated with the USS Omaha incident, right? This kind of like balloon-like object that's descending and then it splashes down, and very unlike a balloon, it goes under the water. My point is that we, by confirming the authenticity of that video with the Pentagon, and again, it was Susan Goff that actually confirmed that to us, and further stated that, and this was something that was being examined by the UAP task force, that gives us an example of the kinds of things that are not mentioned specifically in the ODNI report, but which we know that they were looking at as instances involving UAP. There are other examples we've reported on there at the debrief, but my broader point here is that when it comes to access to that information and trying to understand what they're studying, the ODNI report says that most of the data that they looked at was collected, between 2019 and, 2021. So, within a very short period right there. And so the guys and I at the debrief, we've wondered, it's like, okay, if there's a whole, maybe 70 years or more of information that has been collected by government, are the new investigative committees going to have access to all that, the historical data? This comes back around to the very fundamental question you asked earlier about the updates on effort to capture or exploit discovered UAP. Well, on the outside chance, let's go down the rabbit hole for a minute. If it had been captured in the past, do they have access to that information? And if so, how will that inform their foregoing, or rather their forthcoming investigations? As we move into 2022 and beyond, are they going to have a better grasp on what we're dealing with based on what has been collected now for more than half a century? I'd like to hope so.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, the one and only Micah Hanks, talking about the NDDA. When we come back, we'll talk about those reports. And I also want to talk about the establishment of a science plan. All of that and much more right after this. Stay with us.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, BX.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? Unex Media publishes non-fiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNXDB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unexmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unexmedia.com.
Why is it we're not very good with our health regimen until it's too late? We don't put oil in the car until the engine blows up. When the body's out of balance, your health is not so good. Give your body some love. Log on to GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. Try our Life Change Tea, which cleanses you from harmful intruders. A clean colon is one of the ways to bring the body in balance. We also carry organic supplements to help you get where you need to go. So do your body a favor. Log on to GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. You can even visit our sales page to save some dough. Does anybody call money dough anymore? Anyway, if you're looking for short, helpful health tips, go to YouTube and punch in Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. So, log on to GetTheT.com, shop, get balanced, then learn some cool tips at Health Matters Now. You'll be glad you did. That's GetTheT.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only drink Fade to Black blend coffee from River Moon. Just click on the River Moon Coffee banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code F2B Blend.
This is the only way forward.
This is Fade to Black. Make contact.
When you're in the house for longer periods of time, you can see them flying or running across the floor. Ooh, yuck. They're unhealthy, gross, and disgusting. Bugs. I loathe bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. On contact, it kills hidden bugs, including ants, roaches, and fleas. Plus, Orange Guard is a residual repellent. All of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard. Available at orangeguard.com, Whole Foods, and Ace Hardware.
Gold loves chaos, uncertainty, and disarray. History shows us what gold does when people aren't sure about the government, the stock market, their jobs, or their retirement savings. Our national debt is skyrocketing. Gold and other precious metals are a defense measure against inflation and a stock market that might take years to recover. So what can you do right now to protect yourself? Call United Gold Group. We offer gold and other precious metals delivered securely within 72 hours. Are you worried about the stock market? We can also help you set up a real gold or silver IRA or a 401k. Safe and secure. United Gold Group makes gold ownership affordable. Call now and get up to $2,500 in free gold or silver with a qualified IRA. Call 800-753-8534. That's 800-753-8534 or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why fade to black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks. So much to discuss, and Micah thinks he's getting off easy. No, we're gonna have to go into overtime tonight. Micah's like, what? But I'm reading Micah's notes. See, I can see it on the camera, and he doesn't know that. And I can see. Were you surprised that I'm reading your notes?
Were you really under the impression that the notes I placed out there on the camera so that you could see them were the ones I'm actually reading?
Oh, man. You are a spook.
Let me ask you a question. Are the people in the chat room, I'm not looking right now, are they asking if I'm a CIA employee tonight or is it FBI tonight? Which is it?
Yeah. It's both. It's both. I mean, you've been fighting that battle for a long time. And now that you're over at the debrief, man, that's comes with the territory now, man. And you're dropping all of the information tonight. Yeah, he's an advisor to Congress now.
Well, if you can't beat him, join him, Jimmy.
Even I just stepped back, man. The hair stood up. I was like, oh man, here we go. They infiltrated Fade to Black, and you know what though? I've seen your socks, and I just don't think your socks say spook. I just think that is part of. You go into the agency for an interview, and they're going to say, "Let me see your socks."
What are you talking about?
You don't know what I'm talking about?
About the socks?
Yeah, let me see your socks right now. What are you wearing?
No.
You're
denied.
Yeah,
I denied that request.
Okay. Okay. Two things I want to get this into quickly before we get to the science stuff. In the NDAA, both in the NDAA and the Gillibrand Amendment, clearly states, now this is part of the legislation, that there will be an unclassified public version of the report semi-annually, that's every 6 months, presented to Congress and then released to the public, which says that we are now on January 10th. So I'm anticipating another report sometime in the month of June, and then another one in December. What do you expect that side? Is it going to be a wash, rinse, repeat version of the UAP task force report where it's not going to say anything?
That's a good question. Again, what's outlined, as you mentioned, annual report to Congress. I mean, an annual report, but then also semi-annual briefings. And then we're supposed to get these regular reports, both classified and unclassified, that are provided to Congress, and presumably the unclassified versions made available to the public. What we saw in June of last year was this preliminary assessment. I think the title says it all. We decided to start collecting information on UFOs for the first time since the end of Project Blue Book, at least as we're publicly admitting, and at least as far as being within the scope of a official investigative body within government, the UAP task force, that is actually looking specifically at UAP. Again, as we know, different government agencies sometimes happen to collect information that may have to do with UFOs. This has been known to civilian researchers for years because they've been filing FOIA requests to groups like the FBI, to the CIA, the NSA, geospatial intelligence, go on down the list. And sure, we get, documents revealed from time to time that happen to deal with UAP, even if those agencies aren't explicitly looking at it. So when you got the UAP task force saying, okay, well, we're going to start looking at this, so we're going to gather information that you guys have all collected, okay, and then we're going to look at unique reports. We're going to look at what the Air Force and the Navy have been collecting using this new formalized reporting mechanism that we instituted in 2019. Within this 2-year period, what will we find? And sure enough, they come up with about 144 cases, these all dating back as far as 2004, but that, as we've noted in the past, you and I and others, pretty explicitly and obviously references the Nimitz incident. I don't doubt that there may have been some others, maybe from 2015, right? The 2 incidents for which we have seen other Navy videos, right? These things off the East Coast, and probably some that you or I don't know about. But in sum total, what we have is 144 instances of things that can't be identified. Is there more information about those? Again, the debrief team has already revealed, and others too. Again, you got to give props to George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, and a lot of others who have diligently worked to try and get access to information about other things that government is collecting information about. So obviously there are some things that we have not seen in those reports. So my hope, back to your question, is future reports that we will see from the ASRO or other agencies, I hope it's going to give us more details, or it's going to give us more analytics. It's going to give us more information about what we have learned from the study of these things. Again, keeping in mind some of the things we've talked about, their hopes to try and capture or exploit these discovered UAP, looking ahead to the science plan. And we're going to talk more about that in a moment, but I'll just kind of, tease the fact that a part of what the science plan under the ASRO entails involves providing the foundation for potential future investments to replicate any such advanced characteristics and performance. Again, in the parlance of conventional UFO researchers from the last few decades, that would be probably termed a little differently. They might say reverse engineer, but that seems to be essentially what they're describing right there. So again, I got to say, back to Mick West's point, if he felt like a lot of the verbiage that we're talking about, you and I tonight, was informed by the UFO community, I don't doubt that it was, but that may not be a bad thing, whether or not the UAP that is being studied comes from here, from there, from outer space, from China, from Russia. I think it's applicable to any kind of UAP that may be studied here.
I disagree with the Mick West assessment, though. As much as I like Mick West, no, I can't go with that. I don't think that Gillibrand is using information from the UFO community in that amendment, or Marco Rubio, or anybody else that contributed to the NDDA. No, I just don't see that as reality at all. But moving on to the science side of this, because when we talk about the classified version of this report, that is annually. That's once a year. The unclassified is semi-annually, twice a year. When we get to the science side of this and the classified version of this report, it says the UAP office will be responsible. This is the Gillibrand Amendment. Will be responsible for implementing a science plan to test scientific theories. That's very curious, right? Scientific theories related to UAP characteristics and performances. Very interesting. I wonder how this is put in there, knowing that it is established in the NDAA because of other information that has been gathered already.
Well, again, so I think I understand where you're coming from in the sense that you're looking at this through the lens of, what has informed this legislation being an understanding of information that's primarily been collected by government. I'm looking at it as, having drawn somewhat from civilian UFO investigative efforts over the years. I mean, I don't doubt it's at least in part a little of both, right? Now, back to the main point there, something fascinating that we also can discern from this reading between the lines is the difference between the way that various countries approach this problem. Fairly explicitly in the wording of the, again, I'm just going to call it the Gillibrand Amendment because this is where this wording actually originates from, even if it's now been passed into law, versions of it or a version of that. But if we go back to around 2000, when we had the Condign report, right?
Yes.
Pass or that was carried out by the UK, they said, yeah, UAP exist, and they essentially conclude that most of them are atmospheric plasmas. What's really interesting about this science plan, as outlined in the Gillibrand Amendment, is the fact that they're looking at things like, again, propulsion, materials, countermeasures, weapons, power generation, how these kinds of things might be derived from or discerned from study of the phenomena, right?
Right.
Now, plasmas, last time I checked, again, they don't have material structure. They don't produce weapons. They may produce a energy source that might be used in another application for power generation, but they are not generating power, i.e. some kind of mechanical contrivance that does this. In other words, my interpretation is that the Americans tend to be looking at this problem and saying, well, we want to discern, indeed, if there is a technology. And this comes back to a real question on my mind, and it has been for a long time. Most of us, guys like you or I, Jimmy, we would look at UFOs, we would read a UFO book, and we would say, listen to these accounts of these extraordinary aerial vehicles. Whose are they? How do they work? Is this anti-gravitational propulsion? What is this? Are they electromagnetic spacecraft of some kind? So a fundamental question for people who are less familiar with UAP would be, okay, can these phenomena be studied? And can it be demonstrated reliably that what we are observing is indeed technological? Even if we don't know how that technology works, can we observe characteristics demonstrated by the phenomena that clearly indicate to us that it is not some natural phenomena, that this must be something mechanical, that this must be a kind of technology? So, again, reading between the lines, that's what I'm seeing here. They are looking for those evidences of unequivocal technology, and further, how we can learn from that, how we can study it, maybe replicate it, and of course, in the best case, or depending on the circumstance, maybe worst case scenario, maybe capture and study that technology. But again, if we're just talking about Chinese drones, I mean, it's not going to be very problematic if we happen to capture one. Again, if we go back in history and we look at the capture of the Enigma machine, this actually gave the Allies a tremendous advantage during the Second World War. It allowed us to intercept communications coming from Nazi Germany, and it gave us a great advantage. So really, in the historical context, that has been something that has been very useful in wartime. And in the modern context, I mean, I would see that as being directly applicable here. The problem is, if the UAP that is captured and studied doesn't come from China or Russia. And eventually it may be the case that if we are successful in capturing it, that and that alone may help us determine indeed whether or not we're dealing with a foreign adversary's technology or something much different, much more exotic that nobody in government perhaps expected, although I think a few probably do. But again, the issue I take really, Jimmy, is so many in the media who continue to kind of play down that idea that, we aren't looking for little men, and the government has made clear that they're looking for real threats that emanate from right here on Earth. No, I'm not so sure that that's the only thing they're looking for. And again, to that point, allow me to just quote DNI Avril Haines. During that event, I got my notes here, hang on. The event Our Future in Space from back on November 10th of last year, Avril Haines sat down there at the National Cathedral and she said, and I quote, "We don't have a consistent way of reporting this information. We need to integrate, frankly, a lot of data that we get. We need to get better at collecting data that's useful to us from different sensors that are available to us, and we need to deepen our analysis in these areas." She further states the main issues that Congress and others have been concerned about are safety of flight concerns and counterintelligence issues. She's talking about this in direct relevance to UAP, but then finally she says, of course, there's always the question of, is there something else that we simply do not understand that might come extraterrestrially? Now,
yes,
look, guys.
Yes. And on that point, not only from her, but we've had a couple of ex-directors of the CIA and ex-directors of national intelligence in 2021 that both clearly stated that we've been tracking these objects approaching Earth with our satellites and watching them enter our atmosphere. Yes. Now, that is data collection that certainly hasn't been shared, I would think, with Congress or an intelligence committee. Or is this just the NRO? Are these NSA satellites? Are these Navy satellites? What is collecting this information, and who is getting the reports once that data is collected?
Right. Well, again, the point I would make, and again, you've mentioned a couple of times, you like Mick West. I actually like a lot of his analyses too. I'm not trying to give him a hard time. When I reference Mick's work, I have, I think, fewer problems in a lot of ways with what Mick West says than I have with the way that the media follows his line of logic to the exclusion of all other possibilities. The point I'm trying to bring attention to is when your director of national intelligence sits down and says, look, guys, in our report, that we delivered back in June, there was that other category. It didn't say extraterrestrial. Other was intentionally ambiguous. It was left open to possibility that there are a variety of different things that UAP might be, which we haven't identified yet. The report didn't say it, but the DNI did. She said some of these things might come extraterrestrially. I don't recall, Jimmy, in my lifetime, an instance where there was an official from government that was necessarily in a live public forum more explicit than she had been on that occasion. And for those who would continue to say, well, what the government's really looking at is just evidence of technologies from Russia or China, you need to go back and listen to what DNI Haines said. Is that proof of the existence of extraterrestrials? No. So any skeptic bloggers out there listening to us right now, don't misconstrue what I say right now in your blog post tomorrow as me conveying that. What I am saying is she seems open to that possibility. Don't rewrite the narrative. Listen to what she says, not what you want it to be.
Well,
she seems far more open-minded than a lot of the skeptics. Go ahead.
That's right. And Bill Nelson 2 months ago, who runs NASA, said exactly that. And I don't even think he pulled any punches. I don't think he held back. He was very direct in his assessment and what the mission statement is for NASA, that there is some extraterrestrial life out there. NASA is looking for it. And right now, the universe is too big to say that we're alone, and there are things going on this planet right now, and we are interested in finding out what ET is doing. Bill Nelson didn't play around with his words 2 months ago.
No, and I am a huge fan of Bill Nelson. You know, every time he gets up there, I mean, we have never had a NASA director who is as enthusiastic as he is. You know, he looks sort of like an alien himself. I think if I had to narrow down which one, it would be the aliens in the film depiction of Fire in the Sky, the story of Travis Walton. Just look up pictures online. You'll see the comparison I'm making. But all kidding aside, I mean, Bill Nelson, every time I hear the guy talk, I get excited. You know, there are billions of galaxies out there, and we are looking for, in the vastness of the universe, the life that we know must be there somewhere. I mean, just the way that he talks, you can tell he has spent his whole life fascinated with this, and he still has that same energy. But I think we are extremely fortunate to have a NASA chief right now who is in his position while all of this is happening outside of NASA and other agencies, you know, with all this UAP interest. Because what did we see the day that the ODNI report dropped? We saw a fact page appear on NASA's website about UAP.
Yep.
Now, if you read that fact page, of course, it said nothing about UAP until the very end, and it further stated that NASA doesn't actively look for these things, but there's data that we collect, which we make available to the public, which may also happen to collect information on UAP. Despite that very kind of ambiguous statement about UAP, I mean, the fact that there was a fact page, and further that before that and since that fact page appeared, Bill has continued to be like, look, you know, our agency is looking into this. We're very open to the possibility.
He said, he said, part of our mission and our mission statement is to search for extraterrestrial life. That is what we do.
That is exactly what he said. And let me be clear. He didn't say part of our mission is to look for UAP or flying saucers. He said we are looking for extraterrestrials. But if indeed, as the ET hypothesis proponents have long held, if indeed that is the reality behind the observations of saucers, at some point we're going to have to come to a reckoning where NASA and all these other agencies, I mean, they are looking for extraterrestrials. And indeed, we may find evidence of it, not out there, not through telescopes, not looking for, you know, the wavering effect on a star by the gravitational influence of little planets circling it, you know, not based on the radio signals that they may send or the actual laser signals or other kinds of optics that they use to communicate. No, we may find evidence of those extraterrestrials right here. And again, there are some researchers, you know, Ravi Kaparapu there at NASA, Jacob Hock-Misra, a few others, who have begun to broach the subject. Guys, let's extend the techno-signature search, but let's not necessarily just look out there. Let's start looking for those techno-signatures in our own atmosphere. What if the last place we thought to look
was right here?
For these intelligences, what if it was right under our nose? Yeah. And that very well may be the case.
Now, another point in the Gillibrand legislation is this probably some of the most dramatic parts of her legislation. Evaluate any links between UAPs and foreign governments or non-state actors. The UAP office will be tasked with evaluating threats that UAPs may pose to the United States. Additionally, the office will be responsible for coordinating with federal agencies, including the FAA and NASA, and international allies and partners on UAPs. Now, when I specifically think of, you know, Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, Spain, France, Italy, right? You know, our partners out there. But the non-state actors part of this is interesting. What a non-state actor is that off planet? Because state actors are countries. Okay, there's 200 countries here on planet Earth. A non-state actor, is that a terrorist organization, or is that something that is off planet?
So again, I think that part of the beauty of the wording of this legislation is in some ways its ambiguity. I've talked about that point with a lot of different people, and they always almost say the same. They all give me a different response, but the same way. Well, I just interpreted that to mean fill in the blank. One interpretation might be, for instance, like you mentioned, okay, what if it's a terrorist group, right? What if this is like Richard Dolan's concept of a breakaway civilization, right? A non-state organization with incredible funding mechanisms and resources, and they are creating these things. Could a non-state actor also be a non-Earth intelligence? I mean, really, I don't see any problem with, connecting those two ideas, speculatively at least. Might another interpretation simply be for instance, a non-governmental organization which is contracted, i.e. like a black budget program, a aerospace company that is contracted to do work outside of government, right, so that the information is kept off the books, but that is what the UAP represent. That also could be a conclusion. And the fact that we could actually run down the list like this and say these are all things that might mean indicate to me that that was the reason that wording was used instead of black budgets, extraterrestrial visitors, right, breakaway civilizations. They don't put that in the amendment because they intentionally want to say, we want to present a statement on all the things we could potentially be looking for without being too specific, because we don't want to infuriate the skeptics by saying extraterrestrials. We don't want to enliven all the discussion unnecessarily if we mention something that conspiracy theorists are going to gravitate toward. You can see what I'm saying. So again, I think all of the above and none of the above, the ambiguity is probably intentional.
Well, we're going to head towards a break, and we'll come back and get straight into overtime. There was that moment when Marco Rubio was stopped, I think it was by TMZ or something, in an airport, and was directly asked about and confronted with the little green men question, and Marco, to his credit, said, "I'm not talking about little green men here. I'm paraphrasing, but I am. I'm not talking about, but I am talking about ET. That we need to focus on. There may be extraterrestrials visiting this planet." And I found that very interesting. I don't think that Marco is, like you're saying, he's not being ambiguous here. I think he's okay with being fairly direct.
Look, I think that to Senator Rubio's credit, and again, him having actually been involved in, associating his name and his, position in government with this topic a little longer even than Senator Gillibrand and others, to his and to her credit, and to all of the others who have helped to make sure that this legislation has passed, I think they're all being very sensible, very logical. They're being open-minded enough, I think, frankly, in the perfect amount. By enough, I mean they are looking at all possibilities without committing themselves to any. They're not being partisan, at least in terms of American political parties. They're not being partisan on this issue. They all seem to be saying, look, there appear to be incursions into our controlled airspace that involve technologies that we cannot identify. And by that does not necessarily mean that they may not be conventional technologies in some cases, but they don't know who is operating it. We want to know who's doing this. Are they surveilling us? What are they doing? This is important. This is a challenge to national security. It needs to be looked at. And that's, in my opinion, what they're doing. And I think they're doing a good job thus far. I commend them for taking the initiative on this. I really do.
Let's take our break right here. We'll come back and get straight to overtime. Micah is not going anywhere. You don't have anything to do tomorrow. You don't. Tim McMillan can wait.
Yeah.
Oh, you agree?
Yeah, you're going to have to stick around now. It's too late.
It's too late.
We're in too deep, buddy.
This is Fade to Black. I'm Mississippi Church. Overtime is next with Micah Hanks. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's your girl Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
This is Jimmy Church, and I personally invite you to the 2022 Conscious Life Expo this February 4th through the 7th, live at the LAX Hilton in Los Angeles, California. This year, we have the most exciting speakers, including Linda Moulton Howe, Jacques Vallée, Whitley Strieber, Adam Apollo, Billy Carson, Daryl Anka and Bashar, William Henry, Caroline Corey, Susan Slaughter, Daniel Brinkley, Sarah Breskman-Cosme, George Noory, Gail Thackeray, and many, many more. I will be hosting all weekend long, including the keynote Ancient Secrets panel on Friday night, 5 vendor and exhibit halls, 3 floors of speakers, panels, and celebration. This is the biggest event of the year, and early bird passes are available now. Just go to ConsciousLifeExpo.com for the schedule, speakers, and information. That's ConsciousLifeExpo.com. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I take Life Change Tea supplements every single day. It's what I do. Click on their banner at jimmychurchradio.com.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? Unex Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNXDB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unexmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unexmedia.com.
When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2B Blend for 15% off of your order today.
This is Billy Carson with ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Forbidden Knowledge TV has just reached its 1-year anniversary. That's right, 1 year. And as a show of appreciation, we are giving all new subscribers a free 30-day trial of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's 30 days to binge watch thousands of movies, documentaries, conferences, workshops, lectures, yoga classes, meditation courses, and so much more. So log on to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv from your computer or mobile device, or get the Forbidden Knowledge TV app on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon, iTunes, or Google Play today, and use coupon code 30daysfree. That's coupon code 30 days free on ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JamieChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks. We're going straight into overtime. Tomorrow night, Emily Harrison is with us, Akashic Records. Wednesday night, Serena Wright-Taylor and Susan Slaughter are here to discuss the 2022 Conscious Life Expo. Thursday night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. Now we're going straight into overtime. And this is where loosen things up a little bit, and I'm going to blindside Micah Hanks with a bunch of stuff and get him uncomfortable. First thing up, Micah, what happened to that flying triangle egressing from the ocean photograph that everybody was up in arms about last year?
Yeah, interesting, isn't it, that we heard so much about that, and then it seems to have gone the way of the dinosaurs before anybody ever even saw it, right? So I'd really like to still see that image. I think a lot of us would. I've seen some very interesting images of UAP over the years. In fact, sadly, I've had some that have been, I say sadly because, presumably they couldn't necessarily be shared, but I've had people, share stories, share images, show me things that I would say very politely, could I get a copy of that? And then thereafter, I'm not actually presented with one. That's the frustrating side to all this, that there appear to be, photographs that represent UAP, and some of them are pretty good, but, getting those into the public record can be very difficult at times. And, and I'll say I haven't seen anything that over the years to me was like, whoa, okay, this is proof. But I've seen some very compelling photographs, and one that was actually sent to me a number of years ago actually purportedly coincided with the sightings of UAP over Stephenville, Texas, about a decade ago. You remember that?
Of course.
More than a decade ago, actually, yeah. But, and the photograph had purportedly been taken by a police officer. You can see a kind of triangular shape. And even more interesting than the triangular shape outlined by green lights, you can see these two, amorphous, nondescript kind of little yellowish lights. But what the officer said these represented was that there were these two globes of light that were moving independently. This had been what initially attracted he and his partner's attention as they cut off the main road and drove out into this field while on duty to actually investigate these. And he actually said in the account that he gave, there was actually a dash cam on that police officer's car, and he said we actually had footage of these lights out there. As we got out there toward the field, we were trying to see what these lights were, and they start to ascend, and they move upward in the sky toward this craft. And he has a film camera in the car with him, right? This is standard procedure that they keep one of these. And he gets out of the car, and he snaps a couple of photographs, and only one comes out, but you can see this triangle and then these two orbs ascending toward it. Now, I went to a friend, and I said, look, that story that was told, that was sent along to you, is there any way that we can establish the provenance of that? Do you know that officer? Do you have any contact with that individual? Unfortunately, yes, as you can imagine, the connections, run dry, and it's impossible to find out. So I actually contacted, in the event that this might have been involved with the Stephenville Police Department, I contacted their police department. And I said, look, I respectfully request, this was a Public Records Act request, not Freedom of Information, but it's essentially in the spirit of the same idea, and each individual state has their own Public Records Act. And so I, under the Public Records Act for the state of Texas, requested any documentation, photographs, dash cam videos, recordings, etc., that they had related to UAP. They didn't even deny the request. They just didn't respond. Maybe I'll try them again at some point. But, unfortunately, more often than not, you will hit dead ends like this. I do hope, though, at some point, the photo you're referencing, which, as it was described to me, I don't know of anyone who's seen it. I know researchers who have spoken with people who say that they have seen it, but the photo you're describing is a triangular-shaped object reportedly emerging out of the ocean, photographed by, maybe like an FA-18 fighter pilot, who with their smartphone snaps an image of this object. And let me be clear, there was a photograph that appeared, I think in like March of 2019 online, and which the debrief reported right after we launched, which is now famously referred to as the acorn. And some people have said, oh, that's the triangle. It's not. My understanding is that is not the same thing as the object described in this other photo that, to my knowledge, has not been released, which purportedly shows a triangular object emerging from the ocean with 3 points of light at its corners.
Didn't Tim McMillan say that he saw this triangle?
I don't recall. I recall asking him if he saw it, and he told me he did not. And to my knowledge, I don't know anyone personally who has told me they have seen it. I have spoken to people who say that they have spoken to people who say they saw it.
Right.
If that makes sense. So,
it is just funny to me that image and the rumors about it, that it had made the rounds with the intelligence agencies. That's the story, right? That everybody had seen it. And this was, I thought for sure, if something was going to get leaked, it was going to be this image. And I've spoken to mutual friends of ours that say that they have seen it, or they have spoken to somebody that saw it, and the image was described to them in great detail. But it's just disappeared. The story has disappeared. And I find that interesting. Now, next, I have, speaking of your book, the UFO Singularity, I have this. Jimmy, in Micah Hanks' 2013 book, The UFO Singularity, he notes, Micah Hanks notes that, are you ready? That the New York Times predictions of the future, that 2022 will be learned that UFOs represent tourists from Earth's future. Did you predict that in your book in 2013, that 2022 was going to be the year?
I didn't predict that. No, again, if memory serves, I don't have my book in front of me, but that was a timeline that was like a series of predictions made by, I think, New York Times readers that they sent in to the New York Times. And so they published this series of, our readers' predictions, right? And some of them were really interesting. And so near the beginning of the book, I feature this timeline along with those reader predictions that have been sent in. But again, that's an interesting one for 2022, isn't it? Right?
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think 2022 is the year?
Well, 2021, again, and I thought it was funny that you invited me on tonight and you said, we're going to be talking about everything UAP in 2022. And I'm like, he really must think I'm a time traveler. We're like, what, a week in here?
Yes. Yes.
But I would say this, looking at 2021 with all the developments that we saw, a lot of people have said at this point, things are probably going to, calm down for a while. And I wouldn't be surprised if that weren't the case. I did a edition of the weekly newsletter for the debrief, the intelligence brief, a while back, where I talked about this sort of cycle of UFO interest over time. And you see this, there will be a peak of sightings. 1 year, for instance, where this began to happen was 1966. We saw a tremendous number of sightings, especially over states like Michigan. J. Allen Hynek famously put his foot in his mouth, and he said, it's not impossible that these sightings over a marsh area might have actually been swamp gas. He happened to offend a guy who would later become the president of the United States, Gerald Ford. And then there were actual congressional inquiries into it. Some were calling for congressional hearings. Ultimately, what that led to was a surge in interest that resulted in the U.S. Air Force awarding a contract to the University of Colorado to try and get to the bottom of the UAP issue. We saw where that got us. That was the infamous Condon Committee report. But my point is that after 1966 and all that interest, and then, of course, the kind of, straw breaking the camel's back with the issuance of the Condon Committee's report in 1968 and saying, nothing to see here. Science isn't being advanced by the study of UAP, and government would do well not to be in this business. Get out. Get out while you still can. Well, the interest dies off for a few years, but then we have this sightings wave in 1973, and all of a sudden interest is renewed. We see another surge in interest with the publication of books about abductions and things in the 1980s. Again, in the 1990s, when the U.S. Air Force reinvestigates the Roswell incident. And it continues. Again, we saw another sort of surge coinciding with the aforementioned sightings wave over Stephenville, Texas. And in part because an object that was tracked on radar, according to my understanding, flew dangerously close, at least in terms of national security, to the ranch home in Texas of then President George W. Bush. And so you look at the periodicity of these UFO flaps, peaks, in interest in the public, that is something that ebbs and flows like the tide over time. I wouldn't doubt that we would actually see another period of decline in interest before another wave or another surge in interest for some other kind of a reason, whatever may drive that. But what is different right now about what's happening and what has happened in 2021 that, in my opinion, is going to propel us on through 2022 and which may result in more interest, more, I almost loathe to use this term, but I think it's appropriate here, more revelations, would be the fact that, unlike in years past, for the first time since 1968, actually early 1969, after the Condon Committee issued its report and then Blue Book was shut down early in the following year, we now have not only one already established agency within government, but also we have now passed into law the mandate essentially for the establishment of this ASRO as outlined by the Gillibrand-Rubio Amendment. So presumably within the next few months, maybe weeks, I don't know how soon, but there should be two agencies within government looking at UAP. And if there is an active effort to try and collect information, the historical corollary I would see for what may await us in the months ahead, Jimmy, would be that period between 1952 and 1969 when the U.S. Air Force actually did have a systematic study, and I would actually dispute how systematic it was at times. At its very worst, Project Blue Book was a public relations activity that was assuring the public that this was being studied, while in fact the studies were actually very limited, and if anything, were aimed at trying to debunk UAP to the best of the Air Force's ability. I hope that the current investigative arms within government will do better, that they will be transparent, and that they are more well armed for the task than Blue Book investigators decades ago were. But again, the corollary would be that I'm hoping there will also be active investigations and that there may be more information forthcoming in the months, maybe even just in the weeks ahead. That remains to be seen, but if that trend continues, 2022 is going to be hot. And if 2021 was any indication of how hot, it could be, it could get pretty hot, let's just say.
Well, speaking of investigations and going back to 2021, just like that triangle UFO that seems to have disappeared, we have this. This is dated May 3rd, 2021. The Inspector General's Office, Department of Defense, Memorandum for Distribution. Subject, evaluation of the Department of Defense's actions regarding the unidentified aerial phenomenon. We plan to begin the subject evaluation in May 2021. The objective of this evaluation is to determine the extent to which the Department of Defense has taken actions regarding unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs, their words. We may revise the objective as the evaluation proceeds, and we will consider suggestions from management for additional or revised objectives. We will perform the evaluation at the offices of the Secretary of Defense, military services, combatant commands, combat support agencies, defense agencies, and the military criminal investigative organizations. We may identify additional locations during the evaluation. Please provide with us a point of contact for the evaluation within 5 days of the date of this memorandum, which was May 3rd, 2021. The point of contact should be government employee or military service members, a GS-15 pay band equivalent, or the military equivalent. Send the contact's name, title, pay grade, and phone number and email address to. That name has been redacted. You can obtain information about the Department of Defense of the Inspector General from the Department of Defense Directive 5106.01. Signed, Randolph R. Stone, Assistant Inspector General for Evaluation, Space Intelligence, Engineering, and Oversight. Very, very direct, very strongly worded. We haven't heard anything since.
Yeah, that was going to be my point again. The fact that the DOD, and that story again, Tim McMillan broke over there at the debrief, involving a OIG investigation within the DOD. Now that was, again, seemingly not only of interest, but maybe even of greater pertinence in some ways than at that time, what was still the forthcoming ODNI report. We've seen the report, we've seen very little about this OIG investigation. See, so, again, what was the Office of the Inspector General there investigating, and what were the results of that? Is that still pending? Can we expect to see results from that investigation? These are all questions on my mind, but yeah, you're right. I have not seen anything about that since essentially the news was initially reported.
Now, this was central at the time around Lou Elizondo and the director of intelligence. And the reason for this, Danny Sheehan, the missing emails, some of the derogatory statements that were pointed back at Lou Elizondo. And the way that this was worded to me, Micah, the way that I took it, and I don't think I'm wrong here, that the director at that point, the Inspector General, didn't know anything about UAPs. And suddenly all of this is being dropped on their lap. What did the intelligence agencies know? What was the military doing? Had there been actions taken about UAPs? And also that Susan Goff had been making statements on behalf of the Department of Defense about UAPs, but the Inspector General of the Department of Defense didn't know anything and wanted to know what was going on with UAPs and who is doing stuff about it. And that's the way I read this memorandum, that the Inspector General's office was taken by surprise.
Yeah, and that maybe is not a surprising. Again, I think you're probably very close to being right, and that doesn't surprise me in the sense that you're such a smart guy. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, no, I'm not surprised by the government response because, again, they probably are not tasked with looking. I mean, actually, it's not probably. They are not tasked specifically with looking at UAP, and so when they're looking at government involvement with that issue and trying to assess, to what extent, what actions have been taken and other aspects of, an agency's involvement with that or engagement with that topic, they're not looking at it going, hold on, what do we know about UFOs? They're saying, okay, what is all this about? And, what are the levels of engagement that we have seen within this department, this office, this branch, et cetera? Their main focus in life is not to try and discern what we know about UAP. And the fact that this investigation was undertaken does not say so much that they are interested in trying to find out, for instance, what a branch, office, agency, etc. might know about that topic. They are trying to evaluate the actions taken. It so happens to be that that was the primary subject of interest. But again, in this case, there have been plenty of investigations that have been undertaken over the years. Similarly, I don't doubt, many more, in fact, far few involving UAP, right? So that was what was novel about this. The only other thing, too, in my opinion, being the fact that the timing, of course, in the midst of there being a lawsuit that Lou Elizondo was bringing against the DOD, his emails missing, and presumably you're referring, of course, to the fact that as John Greenwald had attempted to try and gain access to some of the emails that existed, he was told that there were no such records, responded to his request, whereas, in fact, we should know that based on the time that Lou Elizondo served and the office to which he served and the period and everything, there should have been these correspondences should have been accessible. So the fact that this occurs, I don't know that there's any kind of explicit relationship, but the fact that this investigation was announced roughly coinciding with that while the ODNI report was pending, and of course, once the ODNI report was issued, it stated that there should be a investigative group established, and that this would be this report, this preliminary assessment from June, was to inform policy and decision making for these future endeavors. Well, again, in other words, what that report actually directed was the establishment of what we now know, of course, as the AOI MSG, right? It's all laid out right there. And then furthermore, actually, there was a memorandum that was released the same day as the ODNI report from Kathleen Hicks. And that memorandum actually stated even more explicitly, what the government was being directed to do and what the formation of the forthcoming, successor to the UAP task force, the AOI MSG, was to be, and when the time frame for its establishment should be. All those things essentially came to fruition. So in the context of all those things that were happening in 2021, that OIG investigation, it being announced in the midst of all that, to me is one of the most interesting things, even though, of course, that is perhaps to be expected given all the interest that topic was seeing at that time.
Yeah, and Kathleen Hicks explicitly stated that was a directorate.
Yes.
I want reports within 2 weeks. And that was extraordinary. And again, back to this memorandum here from the Inspector General's office, is this line: the objective of this evaluation is to determine the extent to which the DoD has taken actions regarding unidentified aerial phenomena. Extraordinary developments in 2021. I mean, it was just one thing after another. And this was a month before the UAP, a month and a half before the UAP Task Force report was released.
Exactly. And so, again, my hope maybe as we move into 2022 is if there are results forthcoming that are released to the public with regard to that investigation and other things too, the forthcoming findings of the AOI MSG, and maybe more importantly, I'm actually holding out more hope for the ASRO as outlined in the NDAA. I just got to say one more thing, though. Not only do you keep up to speed on all this stuff as well as, or in some cases better than many UFO researchers that I know, I think that you also are able to play in this sandbox and keep up with these acronyms and abbreviations. They drive me nuts. I want another blue book. Give me a name I can pronounce and that rolls off the tongue that we can all easily remember, right? Not ASRO. Put that T in there, right? Astro, baby.
It is Astro. Astro. Thank you. What a great conversation tonight, Micah. What is next up over at the debrief? You guys breaking anything this week?
Well, if we were, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, come on, man. Nobody. It's just you and I.
Yeah, just you and I and all those fine folks who tune in every week and listen to your program every night, in fact. But yeah, we've always got things in the works over there at the debrief. I've also got some personal projects that I am looking at trying to launch this year. And you'll be the first to know about those. Let me just put that out there. I've got a couple of irons in the fire related to this topic. And that I hope that in addition to the ongoing efforts of the debrief team, Tim, MJ, Chrissy, Chris Plain, Steve McDaniel, all of us over there, and the work that we're doing. Christina Gomez, of course.
She's amazing. Christina's amazing.
Indeed.
Chrissy blows my mind. I've got to get Chrissy on this show.
Yeah, let's do. Yeah.
No, I've got to get Chrissy on this show. She's just, she's unbelievable. But when you say personal projects, though, give me one.
Well, I've got several writing projects, as in books, that I've been working on over the last couple of years, and I'm hoping, it's a New Year's resolution to get one of those done this year. And the one I'm focusing on primarily right now does involve UAP. With everything going on, it's always difficult to commit to that, but I've got some other things, too, related to that topic, and some things not related to UAP. You know me, I've got interests all over the place, but it's just a juggling act, a tightrope walk every day of the week, and I love it. Wouldn't have it any other way.
That was just the most political answer, non-committal to... that was a dance. Hey, Micah.
I told you it was a tightrope. Look, I'm working on a damn book about UFOs, okay? And I'll come on your show and we'll talk about it when it's done.
Micah Hanks, thank you so much, man, and Happy New Year. It's going to be an amazing year, and you're going to be part of it. Thank you so much, my friend.
I agree, and thank you for having me on. We always have a great time together. Let's do it again.
The absolute very best, Micah Hanks, and he's right here with us on the UnX Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I got to get straight out of here because we just went bumper to bumper, pole to pole tonight. Tomorrow night, right here, Emily Harrison. It's going to be a great night. We're going to be talking the Akashic Records. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitola, and Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast owned and copyrighted 2022 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, Emily Harrison. Until then, I want everybody to be safe. It's time to fade to black.